Welcome in to Check the Mic. Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson. We're live on YouTube, and it's time for another wonderful show, Sam. We get to fix every team in 5 minutes. This time we're going out west, AFC and NFC. How you doing, man?
Doing good. I don't know if I can air quotes with this camera, if it's going to start doing something weird when I do that, but 5 minutes should be in air quotes.
5 minutes. We started this yesterday. Again, just a reminder of a couple little things here. We call it fixing every team in 5 minutes. It's more likely 15 minutes. We used to do it in 5. It was a joke. We couldn't do it in 5. We're too long-winded. We'll give you about 15 minutes per team. We're going to go around the league. Yesterday, we hit the AFC and NFC East, team by team. It's all on the YouTube channel, wherever you listen to your podcast. It's all there, so go check it out. We'll do this one today, and then 2 of these shows for the Norths and the Souths next week while we're in Indy, and we'll be out to the Combine next week with all sorts of fun behind-the-scenes action and everything. And the last housekeeping item, yes, we're still at home recording, studio, work in progress, the Check the Mic new studio being built right down here in Cincinnati. Hopefully be there within the next few weeks.
Yeah, that'll be awesome when it finally gets done, but until then, it's a little bit of work from home time.
And let us know what you guys want to hear. What do you guys want to see in Indy? What do you want to see behind the scenes? What do you, any requests for our Combine week in Indianapolis? Happy to oblige to whatever we need. Yes, we do need coffee. We do need coffee,
which will definitely not include Steve running a 40 based off what happened last time.
I'm not. My knee's still not recovered from the pre-40 injury. My agents released a statement. I will not be running at the Combine. I might have an official statement come out today that I will not be running at the Combine, and so don't expect that. All right, we're getting ready for the AFC and the NFC East, but first, got to tell you about my favorite protein, Orgain. As a former professional athlete, I care about what I put into my body, especially when it comes to protein. So that's why we're so pumped to be sponsored by Orgain. Orgain believes real nutrition has the power to make a real difference in people's lives. Orgain's new 30-gram complete protein shakes offer protein-packed real nutrition designed to satisfy your cravings without any added sugar. Plus, they're an excellent source of premium, ultra-filtered protein with all 9 essential amino acids. Orgain's products are handcrafted with high-quality ingredients. So I'll be bringing my chocolate and vanilla Orgains on the road to Indy. They get the gym right there at the JW. We run into Schefter over there every now and again. So we'll be working out with my Orgain, my 30 grams of protein right after I work out all next week in Indianapolis. And from protein powders to bars to shakes to tons of other nutritional products, Orgain has products that the whole family will love. So remember, there are no quick fixes when it comes to your health. If you want more protein, give Orgain's 30-gram protein shakes a try. Head to Orgain.com/check-the-mic. Use code check-the-mic for 30% off your order. It's the best offer you'll find, but you got to use the code check-the-mic for 30% off. One more time, 30% off. Head to Orgain.com/check-the-mic. Use code check-the-mic. All right, Sam, you ready to go?
Yep, let's go.
We're fixing every team in 5 minutes-ish. We're starting in the NFC West. It's the Los Angeles Rams. First up, made it to the Elite Eight last year, losing in the divisional round to the Philadelphia Eagles. Probably gave them the best game of any team in the playoffs, certainly score-wise. Gave them a good game. In a couple of years, Sam, of kind of resetting this roster, right? They went from go-for-it mode and F them picks, and we never pick in the first round. Now, all of a sudden, we are drafting a lot where they've always drafted a lot, but drafting high last year, reshaped their defense, got younger. Matthew Stafford's still there, and that might be where we need to start. There's a lot of trade rumors around Matthew Stafford as he closes in on his 37-year-old season here.
Yeah, I think that's definitely where we need to start. These rumors are more intense this time around than they were last offseason. I think they existed a little bit last offseason, but like they're for real this time. And so I guess the first question we need to ask if we're like fixing the Rams is this substance? Like, are we actually dealing away Stafford? Because to me, that kind of feels crazy. I understand why it's happening in terms of, there's no more guaranteed money left on that deal after this year. We're basically entering effectively the last year of his contract. So it's sort of decision time with Stafford. If you want to get anything out of him, now's the time to do it. On the other hand, you weigh that against what you said before. This team gave the Eagles the closest game of anybody in the playoffs, not just the NFC, but including the Chiefs, who got wrecked in the Super Bowl. It's not inconceivable that this team could have won a Super Bowl this year if they'd, actually executed that comeback at the end of the Eagles game, if they'd been able to get past Washington in the NFC Championship game, and then who knows if they'd have beaten the Chiefs or not. But like, this team was not a million miles away from another championship. And that's with this young defense sort of just starting to hit its stride. Pair of rookies effectively on the defensive line dominating. Okay, you've got the usual roster turnover and churn in any given offseason, but like, you're looking at this and saying, this is not a rebuild. Like, we're not miles away. We don't have to reset this thing. If you only have a limited amount of time left with Matthew Stafford, there's nothing that says, right now, like 2025 can't be the year, right? If you have one more year left, let's go.
I think a lot of this has to do, though, with when a guy's in his late 30s, the conversations are being had, right? Remember, there was rumors that the Patriots were trying to trade Tom Brady in his late 30s, or trying to figure out, they drafted Jimmy Garoppolo. They were figuring out the off ramp, right, to their current late 30s starting quarterback. I think that's what's happening with the Rams. I don't think they're shopping Stafford. I think they're listening, and I think, and that's the point. And they're listening, and there's a lot of desperate teams around there, right? Now, the problem with this one is if the Rams do trade Stafford, then they become one of the desperate teams. Then it's like, all right, you've got this young nucleus of a roster on both sides of the ball, the Puka Nakuas, Jared Verses, and Kobe Turners of the world. Well, who's leading the ship here now? So I think at the bottom end of the day, I don't think it happens, but they're listening, right? And if the right offer comes along, or the right, a Steelers team or a Raiders team or whoever it is desperate enough to, give up a first rounder, whatever it might be, maybe that ends up being the way it goes.
Even a first rounder, though, like, because what you're doing if you accept any of these deals, or any of these offers that is potentially being put on the table, is you're voluntarily, joining the teams that don't have any pathway through to a Super Bowl, right? Like, ultimately, the Rams sort of, you can debate just how all in they went with the Stafford deal the first time around, when they got their championship. But whatever their strategy was at that point, they went for it. It paid off. They got a championship. And it's like, well, that's sort of the ends justify the means, right? No matter what they did in terms of potentially mortgaging some future or taking gambles, it all paid off because they got that championship. You would do that again this time around. Like, let's go with one more year of Stafford, even if it means we're sacrificing, draft picks that we could get back in return, because there is a real chance that this team could win a Super Bowl in 2025. The alternative is, all right, value for Stafford right now. Let's say we get a first round. Let's say it's a mid first round pick from somebody. You take that deal, but now what? Now you have no shot at any quarterback realistically that can win you a championship next year, right? There isn't one of those out there. Like, are you immediately in the Sam Darnold sweepstakes, and do you think Darnold can do that with this team? I would doubt it. Are you suddenly in the Aaron Rodgers thing, who's even older and just would be free, as opposed to...
That rumor's out there.
Right, in terms of draft picks? Or are you like, we basically immediately punt on 2025, we're rebuilding, and we're trying to find a quarterback in future? I just don't... Like, I don't see the end... I don't see the end purpose of trading him away, even if theoretically, on a ledger somewhere, a first round draft pick is great value for a guy at 37 years old, reaching the end of his contract, et cetera.
I think part of it is they have him through 25 and 26, and part of it is he's making about $40 million per year. This current contract, $40 million per year. It's about middle of the pack now in APY, when it was pretty nice back in 2022. Right. So I think that's part of it as well. Whether Stafford wants to be invested in for another year or two, or through his 39 or 40-year-old season, I think that might be a part of it as well. Let's make the assumption, though, we're in charge. We're playing Les Snead here. We're going to stick with Stafford and build around him. Yeah.
But even if you don't want it long term, I don't see the purpose in trading him away now, even for a first round draft pick, versus just playing out the year. Like, if you assume it's a 1 year, one and done deal, like this year is the last year of Stafford, and then next year we have to cut him, whatever. I still think that 1 year with Matthew Stafford, where you think you have a realistic chance of actually contending, is worth more than trading away that capacity, but having a first round draft pick in a way, like in a year where it probably doesn't get you the Stafford replacement. Like, I just don't see the purpose of that, even if theoretically it's profit or it's the, if it's the sound analytical strategy, it's all ultimately supposed to lead you to a championship, and I don't see your pathway to a championship by doing that.
Yeah, especially with the way things finished last year. They were one of the hottest teams in the
Right.
NFL. They win their first playoff game, win the division. They finished great, man. And look, 2022, just to back up a little bit, 2022 coming off the Super Bowl, not a good season. They had a ton of injuries. The go for it was like, all right, maybe we'll get a reset here. 2023, they did reset. They find Puka Nacua. They find Kyron Williams breaks out. Stafford looks rejuvenated in 23, and then in 24, 4 draft picks on the defensive line. Jared Verse hits, Braden Fisk, second year of Kobe Turner. This is post Aaron Donald retirement too. How are they going to handle retirement? Well, Jared Verse is going to come in and be the clear defensive rookie of the year. So they head into next year without a ton of, starter needs, so to speak. I think there's a couple places on defense they need to replace. They need a left tackle, and they have to figure out what to do at receiver. Cooper Kupp, they've already said, is on the trading block. So let's assume Kupp is getting flipped for somewhere. So to me, it's receiver and tackle where we want to start here for the Rams, and how they're going to, make sure those spots are in good shape heading into next season.
Yeah, tackle as well, because one of the underrated potential free agents is Alaric Jackson, their left tackle. So what seemed like a weakness on paper for years of this team actually ended up being pretty good. But now that guy's hitting free agency. I've been talking about Jackson as a guy that a lot of teams should be targeting in free agency for the same reason. I think the Rams should try and keep him, try and keep him in the building. Don't let him hit the market.
You want to start with that then? Let's re-sign Jackson, right? He's at that point where offensive linemen tend to, make that switch, and if they're going to become good like that, that was a good season where he's coming off a career year, and that generally projects well going forward for an offensive lineman.
It's always it's a tough thing to project, right? When you're looking at offensive linemen or any position really, and on the one hand, the curve is going upwards, like the graph. If you're trying to project out this guy's development, is exactly the way you would want to see it, right? It's nothing but good news. It's all going forward. So you're like, well, that means he's going to continue that ascent, and away we go. It doesn't always work that way, though, and he might have but the flip side of that coin is, it means you're also only really dealing with the most recent year as the good one, right? Whereas the rest of the stuff has not been as good. So if you look at that and say, well, he is developing, he's going to be the guy, he's going to be good going forward, great. Let's hand him a decent contract. Let's keep him in the building. It's all good. The risk, of course, is that you are dealing with basically 1 year of good play as a sample size. And if you have to commit, high-end starter money off the back of 1 year of evidence, that's always risky. But for consistency's sake, if I think he's a good option for teams to chase in free agency, he's a good option for the Rams to keep him. The first wave of free agency is keeping your own players. I would not want to let Alaric Jackson out of the building if I'm the Rams.
All right, well, let's make that move. And then I had a suggestion from someone else, my Morgan Moses binky that I always lean on. There was a suggestion from somebody that Demarcus Robinson should be that next guy, like a cheaper wide receiver option who seems to have, I don't want to say figured things out, but man, has he been far more consistent. I mean, Stafford throwing to Demarcus Robinson, like red zone weapon and everything the last couple of years. What about keeping him as a free agent, keeping him, to complement Puka Nacua? I'm not saying as a 2. I would still want to have a better wide receiver 2 next to Puka Nacua, but Demarcus Robinson maybe as a 3, maybe keeping him in-house as well.
Yeah, I mean, he's a good route runner, and Stafford certainly seems to trust him as a red zone weapon in particular. So yeah, again, if you're building around Stafford, even if it's only for 1 more year, it's a sort of more sensible version of the Aaron Rodgers logic, right? Whatever makes Stafford happy / comfortable is a good thing to be doing. So keeping your left tackle in the building, keeping his favorite red zone target, these are all positive things if you've got Stafford there.
I think they're drafting at 26. I think I think receiver could be in play there, depending on how that board falls. I don't know how the league's going to feel about Matthew Golden from Texas if he ends up becoming a pretty good fit as a route runner to complement Puka. Value might be there at receiver. I don't love it. I tell you, left tackle definitely isn't, right. So going back to the Alaric Jackson thing, picking at 26, you're not you're probably not drafting a plug-and-play left tackle, which is why it is more important for the Rams to get that guy in free agency, whether it is Alaric Jackson or somewhere else. I do think you can get the plug-and-play receiver 2 there potentially, or corner, right? So they've got a cornerback need opposite Darius Williams. Ahkello Witherspoon's a free agent. That is where the same guys that I mentioned for the Bills and some other teams there, Siobhan Revell, Benjamin Morrison, these guys that are top 15 caliber corners who are coming off of injuries, could be there in the 20s. I think some team's going to steal a really good corner coming off injury in the 20s, and the Rams could be primed to fit that value and need at 26.
And even Darius Williams, as I told you the other day, is somehow like in his early 30s already. Like the Rams secondary definitely, I mean, there's some young pieces there, but corner I think is absolutely a position that they should look to bolster, reinforce, add depth, add succession plans, the whole bit. So yeah, I think tail end of the first round targeting corner for them would be huge. D-line would be the other spot, but with those two guys that were rookies last year with Kobe Turner there, like it's a strength already. There's never necessarily a problem with, keep loading up on a strength on what is already a strength, but it's certainly not like if you're trying to split the hairs in terms of like where's our need, that's the deal breaker. Like D-line is definitely not the need.
I think they're in the market for the big bodied guy, right? It's Braden Fisk and Kobe Turner. They're more undersized, penetrating types. Kobe Turner can do anything along that defensive front, but are they in the market for the 360-pound Deion Walker, the Kenneth Grant guy? Everybody was kind of making fun of you for mentioning Kenneth Grant for everybody as well yesterday, like my Morgan Moses. But Grant could be in play. But I think just getting a little bit bigger up front. I know the defense was outstanding down the stretch, incredible run. But there was a point in the season where they were getting beat up on, right? And the Eagles did run on them in the playoffs, and I think they probably want to be a little bit more stout up front. So I could see them getting one of those 340 to 360 pounders that are available in this draft as well.
The Deion Walker thing will be interesting, though, like where he ends up going, because if he goes too high, it's a classic, like I'm terrified of that draft pick type of move.
Yeah.
But equally, like if he starts to slide because the overall body of work is not that great, like at some point he becomes amazing value because you're like, dude, the Bill Parcells planet theory, right? There's only so many humans walking the earth that look like that and have that kind of capacity to do things. So, and then obviously in the middle, it's like this is the appropriate level for that type of gamble. But that range, I think, is pretty significant for him. Kenneth Grant, I think, is a similar story, but a better, like every benchmark there is higher, in my opinion. He's just the baseline is better, the potential is better, all those things. But at some point, like it's a Walker's kind of the gamble for Walker is a fascinating debate.
One more position to just touch on is linebacker. Omar Speight did a really nice job down the stretch for the Rams, but a couple other free agents there. So one starter returning. I just want to throw out Dre Greenlaw's name as a guy within the division, right? We saw them trade Ernest Jones before the season, go with this youth movement at linebacker. I think Greenlaw is the other guy that if you can buy low on him, coming off of injury back after the Super Bowl in 2023, man, I could see him being a huge piece where I didn't love the Rams linebackers, even though the defense came good in the second half. I think they could definitely improve there.
This is also a really, really young defense overall now. Like at some point, I wonder if they're in the market for one of those like 1 year rental, aged veteran type players. Like maybe that's like the Bobby Wagner mercenary role that's been going around for a couple of years now. Bobby Wagner is a free agent again, and maybe it's not Wagner, but maybe the Bucs let Levante David hit the market. But like one of those guys, this sort of stalwart, aged veteran that's been around, various different teams can come in and sort of just play schoolmaster to this entire like youth movement on defense.
Yeah, I would love that. They tried the Wagner thing a couple of years ago, so I don't think they're going that specific route, but I think Greenlaw would be fantastic. So I think we fixed the Rams, man. We're going to keep Stafford, let the draft come to us, fill some needs at the right spot at receiver and corner, get some bulk up front on the defensive line, and bring in Dre Greenlaw. We're feeling pretty good.
Solid.
Rams going to go win the division once again. Second in the division was the Seattle Seahawks. They had the same record at 10-7. Rams had the tiebreaker. A bit of a disappointing finish for the Seahawks. Geno Smith back as the starter, but I think we're all going to start here. Like news-wise, as far as Seattle goes, I mentioned before the season last year, it felt like a year where Jackson Smith and Jigba is going to start phasing Tyler Lockett out. I think Lockett's probably gone. I think we're looking at JSN and DK Metcalf as the 1 and 2 there for Geno Smith. There have been some DK Metcalf trade rumors. I'm not necessarily buying those. I'd hold on to him. But then the big question is going to be the offensive line once again in Seattle, particularly on the interior.
Yeah, I mean, that was the story heading into last offseason, heading into the offseason, even post, like going into the draft and then post-draft as well. It's been the weakness on paper of this team for like upwards of a solid year now. And it was through the season as well. It became a problem. And I think you saw it was a problem anyway, but the second you saw Geno Smith go down and you put somebody else in that unit, you saw just how bad the situation really was. Like I think Geno's reputation gets enhanced the second you put a guy like Sam Howell out there and you're like, wow, that offensive line, particularly the interior, it's actually worse than we thought it was. We already thought it was bad, but you put Sam Howell out there, you're like, this is like a farce that doesn't function. So again, they're in a tough spot because this is part of the John Schneider ethos, right? They don't invest heavily in those interior spots, which I don't think is necessarily an incorrect philosophy, but it does mean that it kind of gets tricky then if you've got a real weakness there, because the easy way of attacking that is like first round draft pick, we plug in a guy with real pedigree to fix this. If you're not going to do that, you now need to hit on these lower round guys, or they need to actually start paying off. And when you came out of last year's draft, you're like, okay, I actually like I applaud what they did, right? They said, no, definitely, we're not going to draft the Jackson Powers Johnson in the first round. We're going to wait. We're going to have the discipline. They come out of the draft with a guy like Christian Haynes. You're like, that's amazing value where they got him. But he didn't play well as a rookie, so somebody needs to actually start playing well with this strategy. Otherwise, it's just you've got a problem spot on the offensive line you're refusing to fix.
I was a big Haynes fan coming out, especially in the third round. He did struggle as a rookie. The one thing I'll say, though, new system, Clint Kubiak coming in, you got the Shanahan, Kubiak, outside zone type of system. That is a fit for Haynes. So I do think he's got a shot there. So as much as like on paper, could they use it? They have an open spot at left guard. Laken Tomlinson's a free agent. Olu Oluwatimi at center was fine last year, but like, could you use an upgrade? Absolutely. And then right guard was a massive issue. And then when Haynes came in, things weren't great. I could see Haynes being a fit, but right. If it's not one of those, like he just gets in the building and it just doesn't work, right? He's overpowered, and it could work though here. The other, system wise, the other question's Abe Lucas as well, who had such a good rookie season a couple years ago. He's heading into the last year of his rookie contract, and he's been in and out of the lineup with injuries, right? So it's not just the interior. They got to kind of future-proof probably right tackle as well. The only solidified spot is Charles Cross at left tackle. So I think it's fair game at all four spots for Seattle to make improvements, not just performance, but also with the new system coming in.
And Lucas has been kind of riding the reputation of his rookie season the whole way. Like, I'm not sure he's actually really backed that up since. He looked really good as a rookie, and he's suddenly like, wow, the Seahawks hit on 2 tackles in the one draft, right? They bookended left and right with the first round draft pick, a guy with, legit top 10 pedigree, et cetera. And then Abe Lucas in the third round was that they got him. And then he's been hurt, and even when he's been back playing, it's like he's been okay. He's been certainly, solid, a degree. Like, you're okay. You're comfortable with him being your starter if the interior is good. But it's not like he's kicked on from that rookie season and sort of really grown the way Charles Cross has and developed into like a really top-tier tackle. It's like his best football was still right out of the gate, and even that was sort of adjusted for expectation a little bit. You're right. Like, I think he's definitely a question mark at right tackle. It's just that it's a smaller question mark than the interior, which is like, that's a problem.
So look, I think this is another one of those spots. They have to address something in free agency. I don't think they're going to necessarily go and get a Trey Smith and be the team that breaks the bank for him. They're in negative cap space at the moment, which again, all that stuff gets reset by the league year, but they're not the most flexible team from a cap perspective. So I don't know if it's a Trey Smith thing, but I think they're another second wave of free agency type of team. If they do want to upgrade center, whereas a Drew Dahlman, potentially being out there, I think they should dabble in that, $8 to $12 million free agency range.
Yeah, Dahlman makes a ton of sense. I was going to mention him. He, I think, would also be a fit for that scheme, the Shanahan offensive scheme, and a guy that has already shown capable football. I think potentially can look even better than that in the Shanahan system. Now, that itself is a little bit up in the air, right? After last season, previously, the Shanahan system or systems, that family tree of offenses had boosted or masked offensive line problems. Last season, that stopped happening. So is that a new reality, or was that just a weird year where all three of the closest Shanahan derivative offenses struggled in the same capacity? So that, I think, is an open question heading into this year. Previously, we would have assumed that a Shanahan scheme coming in would immediately boost the production or hide the deficiencies of offensive linemen across the board. I don't know if that's true anymore.
Walt actually has a good suggestion finally.
Wow.
Not so much the round one suggestion here, but Gray Zabel, right? The guy that was hyped up so much out of North Dakota State and the ability to play center, play guard. Seahawks are picking at 18. I don't love him at 18, but if you trade down, maybe if you could trade down maybe into like the late first or early second, they have pick 18 and pick 50, but somewhere in that 28 to 40 range, I think would be good value for Zabel and two position versatility. I kind of like that as a potential option there, but I think you go second wave of free agency, have to address and add some more depth in the draft as well.
I mean, I do wonder how high a guy like Gray Zabel will end up going. I mean, he's gone from, a day two guy already to now we're seeing him pop up at the bottom of first round mock drafts. Like, it's not that big a leap to go from appearing, in the late 20s, the early 30s to 18. Now, what it does do is, but it does, like, then you start to run aground of the John Schneider. They don't want to draft interior offensive linemen there. So if they take him at 18, are they seeing him as a right tackle? Blah, blah, blah. So it might not necessarily be the best fit in the world for the way the Seahawks do things. But, I mean, Gray Zabel, I have no doubt whatsoever, would come in and improve one spot on this offensive line.
Yeah. Right. So you get into the philosophy thing, but I think that'd be an interesting move. They're another team I think that could use the big-bodied defensive tackle, right? They drafted Byron Murphy last year. He played a lot of nose tackle at Texas. Don't want him playing nose tackle at the NFL level. Want him playing over guards more. They had Jonathan Hankins, Jaron Reed last year. They're both out. I think they're another team with the big boys, the Kenneth Grants of the world, right? Those guys are all in play to complement Byron Murphy. I don't see them going defensive tackle back-to-back years necessarily in the first, but I think maybe later in the draft. Just something to keep an eye on there. I know you wanted to talk tight end maybe for the Seahawks here, and I have a suggestion. Taysom Hill. Hill. Remember when the Saints were the best team in the NFL last year? Do you remember that?
In week 2?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
2 weeks into the season. And when without Taysom Hill, they're a 45-point per game team. Without Taysom Hill, once he gets injured, you got some issues. Clint Kubiak unlocked Taysom Hill like no one else in history. Sean Payton couldn't do it. No one could do it. Clint Kubiak, get Taysom Hill in here to go with DK, JSN, and Kenneth Walker. After poo-pooing the Taysom Hill experiment for about 7 years, Sam, it only took me till like he's almost 40 years old to just be on the Taysom Hill bandwagon, get him in here.
Okay. I'm still not convinced Taysom Hill is a tight end, like as much as just a power running back. And
he's the running back complement to Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet. It's going to be great.
All right. I mean, I would give you, so they're picking, as you said, 18 in this draft. That's prime real estate for a guy like Colston Loveland, the Michigan tight end. If we assume that, the top tight end of this draft, whose name is escaping me right now.
Tyler Warren, but I don't know.
There we go. Yeah. If we assume Tyler Warren is gone by 18, I mean, yeah, Tyler Warren, if he falls to 18, perfect. If Tyler Warren is gone before 18, which it sounds very likely, Colston Loveland is the next guy up and a guy that's getting a ton of first-round buzz himself. That would make sense for them.
Now, Tyler Warren is the next Taysom Hill. So you get Taysom Hill and Tyler Warren, right? He's a left-handed Taysom Hill. I think that's beautiful.
Left-handed Taysom Hill.
I think they're definitely. I mean, look, Schneider's been good with the positional value thing. That draft a couple years ago when they had 2 firsts and they got Devin Witherspoon and JSN, and they got JSN at a time when they had one of the better 1-2 punches in the NFL. Love that, right? So they go positional value. It's going to be tough to say tight end at 18, guard at 18, but that is where some of the needs are. So we'll see how that plays out for Seattle. But I don't hate those picks potentially.
But like this is the potential issue with like a rigid adherence to the positional value mantra when it comes to drafting. Like, yeah, theoretically that's absolutely, I think, the way that both of us would want to draft. But at some point, if that's the weakness, right? And you run out of ways to fix it. So you end up like, well, do we like rigidly say we don't draft this position and we need to target something else, even though you really don't need that position, and like persist with a gaping sore on the roster? Or do you say, like, we swung and missed at this a few times now, the way to fix it is this first round draft pick at number 18 overall that we don't that doesn't sort of fit the book, right? But it's the fix, like it's the patch for the sore that we have on this roster. Like at some point, I would say, look, I liked what you did last year. It didn't work. So if that's still the problem this year, like if they go through free agency and we're heading into this draft and it's still a massive problem on the interior of that offensive line, do you say, and there's a really good offensive lineman sitting there at 18 that's like, the top guard on the board, are you still saying, nah, position value, you can't take him there, you got to wait until the 3rd round and draft some guy we don't really love? Like, just take him. I understand it's not optimal, but it's like the position you put yourself in.
Then it's maybe a Tyler Booker is in play. I mean, every time we mocked for Seattle last year, we said JPJ we would take there. And by the way, if JPJ, the way he played as a rookie with the Raiders, if he was the 18th or 20th pick last year, you'd say that's fine. That's you're gonna a good guard who could be really good, right? So I don't think that's crazy. I like a couple of the suggestions in the chat. Drake Holiday says Elijah Arroyo closer to round 3 if he's available. Would love that. The athleticism that he showed at the Senior Bowl and at Miami. And Walt does have something. Walt actually did come up with something else pretty good that I've thought about that I would do if I was another team, trading for Michael Mayer of the Raiders. I think there's a buy low opportunity for the Raiders to go get Michael Mayer. They already have Brock Bowers, but it's a new coach, new system, new everything. Mayer's been a little underwhelming 2 years in, but we know the tight ends often take till years 3, 4, and 5. I would love a buy low. That'd be one of my suggestions for a lot of tight end needy teams around the NFL right now.
In a similar vein, I would certainly throw a phone call towards Green Bay and find out if Luke Musgrave is someone they'd consider moving on from. Like that was the first of the tight ends they drafted that year. Tucker Kraft has definitely jumped him. Musgrave has dealt with injury issues, and it just hasn't been a factor for them yet. But I wonder if Green Bay would be willing to listen to offers for Musgrave, and if you can get him healthy and unlocked, you've got this dynamic move tight end who's just had a rough start to his career.
The one more thing, or a couple more things we need to talk about. Tyler Lockett, pretty much out the door. I would see them moving on from him. JSN was so good during the second half of the season. So still love that 1-2 punch at receiver for the Seahawks. You still have Jake Bobo there. I think is a pretty good receiver 3, but you can still add some depth, maybe some speed, just a pure speed type of option there. Kubiak was Rashid Shaheed. He was getting him open. Valdez Scantling, if they had a nice speed option there, I think that would be great. And then defensively, Mike McDonald's first year as defensive coordinator, it did feel like the defense got better once they traded for Ernest Jones, even though it happened mid-season. He's a free agent, and I think they probably want to bring him back, I would say. And not a whole lot of other needs on the defensive side of the ball other than big body defensive tackle, and then I would say bring Ernest Jones back at linebacker.
And if you're wide receiver in free agency, I would kick the tires on somebody like Darius Slayton, who was sort of one of these players that's kind of emblematic of like a bad receiving core. Like, man, Darius Slayton's a much bigger part of this offense than we're comfortable with. But that doesn't mean he's not a good player. It's just like he can't lead the line in a terrible offense. Like if you have an offense with Geno Smith and a powerful 1-2 punch at running back and JSN and DK Metcalf, and suddenly Darius Slayton is number 3 and a vertical threat, that I think is a really nice like melding of skill set plus situation.
So Darius Slayton, bring back Ernest Jones, draft the best player, guard, tight end in round 1, perhaps, or you get the guard and you get Arroyo on the turn. I think we're getting there.
So my I mean, if we're taking over, right? If John goes on vacation for a couple of months and we take over the Seahawks, and this is what we're doing,
I'll
we are
talk
saying,
to him next
look,
week. See if they'll hand over the reins.
I love the instruction manual that you've left us, right? I love this position value thing. I think it's smart. However, in the current situation, the best thing we can do is take the suboptimal by the book thing and just draft the player that fits our biggest hole. And even if it's in the first round and we don't love drafting guards there, like if I'm taking the best guard or the best tight end, like the guy that fills the problem spot. And I'm a little bit annoyed that I had to do that, but that's where I am.
Fixed. Seahawks fixed. They're getting over the hump next year after we've fixed them this offseason. All right, let's go Arizona Cardinals. I know where we're going with the Cardinals. They up and down last season, still pointed in the right direction, I would say. They go 8-9, doing it with a roster that was completely reshaped over the last couple of years, but still has more work to do. And all we talked about this year when we broke down Cardinals games, both in previews and reviews, they were tough to predict how well they were going to play every week, and the defensive line needs an overhaul. And I think Jonathan Gannon, heading into year 3 as the head coach, I think he's done a nice job. I think the defense is overachieved, I would say, relative to what the personnel would bring to the table. And my big takeaway all season for the Cardinals was, want to see what this defense looks like when they have better personnel. So this year should be all about adding multiple pieces to that defensive line.
Yeah, I mean, last season the defense on paper looked awful, and it looks worse this season. Like somehow, like okay, they've got there's a lot of young players there, and who knows what their projection is, but like they're losing some of their better defensive players on a unit that already looked terrible on paper. Kaiser White at linebacker, the Barbarian. Okay, he's coming off a knee injury, but Dennis the Barbarian Gardeck is out of there as well, theoretically. Baron Browning, who they brought over, Victor Dimukeji, who's a really useful rotational guy up front. Like the defensive line already looked like a preseason, a week 4 preseason team, and it's losing some of the best players. So I think overall, there's almost nowhere on that defense that you couldn't upgrade with a quality player, but definitely the defensive line is first and foremost. And again, that feels like one of those teams that should just be hammering that. They've got a ton of cap space. They have the ammunition to do it. And if teams are going to overpay for guys like Milton Williams, I mean, this is a landing spot.
Also you have the Eagles connection with Gannon to both Josh Sweat and Milton Williams. I think if we're trying to pair free agents together from a predictive standpoint, I could absolutely see that, right? Either guy. Because again, I think first order of business, Sam, let's just get this out of the way. You do not, under any circumstances, let the Barbarian walk out that door. You do not let him out of the building, right? So the Barbarian, he's back. Now, love the Barbarian, Dennis Gardeck. Don't love him as my best pass rusher, though, right?
No.
Love him as a complementary piece, right? You have Josh Sweat, you have Milton Williams, you have somebody from the draft, you have Darius Robinson developing. Barbarian is going to get his 10 sacks. Josh Sweat, Dennis the Barbarian Gardeck, get them working together. So Barbarian's coming back on our team. And then I would grab one of those former Eagles. I would pay the money for Milton Williams or Josh Sweat. I think that's the spot Arizona's in. And then also replenish in the draft. The same thing I've suggested for many teams, the potential to double up on the defensive line in the draft, prime real estate this year, the way it shapes up.
Yeah, I mean, I think Milton Williams makes a ton of sense for this defensive line. Like Milton Williams, last year's top draft pick, Darius Robinson, like these are guys that can coexist on the same defensive front. You still need an edge rusher as well. Like this is a team I think that could conceivably attack this in free agency and the draft with multiple players in both and not be overloading things. Like right now they're right now their best pass rusher theoretically is Zaven Collins, who is a former like a convert from off the ball linebacker. Like this is a team with very, very little on the defensive line.
Yeah, I mean, I read out the rotation last year. Roy Lopez, and I know some people like Roy. I think our guy Nate Tice likes him as a nose tackle type. I mean, we're talking um, PFF grades for a lot of these guys in the 40s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. And you say what you want about PFF grades; they're pretty good indicators of O line and D line performance. And so the Justin Jones, Bilal Nichols, Dante Stills, LJ Collier, Kyrus Tonga, Roy Lopez, those are the guys they've been trotting out there the last couple of years. So they need help across the board. Only 5 draft picks for Arizona after a high volume draft last year in particular. So I think it's got to be free agency where I think they got to make at least one of those moves, whether it's Josh Sweat or a Milton Williams. I'm leaning on one of those has to happen. And then at pick 16, we've talked a lot about James Pierce and his fall, and like I would love to get him in the teens. I think he's a top 10 caliber player in this draft that you could get in the teens. And if you got a say Milton Williams, Josh Sweat, bring back the Barbarian, like in 3 moves, you're talking about this defensive line looking much better.
Yeah, I think that's a definite possibility. The mid of that first round is going to be interesting because I think you're going to have quite a lot of those options, whether it's interior or edge. Walter Nolan. I think you're going to have plenty of those guys available. So a little bit contingent on what you do with free agency, but I agree. Like this is a team that should be vying for one of the best or one of the biggest contracts in free agency for whether it's Milton Williams, Josh Sweat, Adigi Zua is another guy we've talked about as in that option as well. Like I think you can potentially bring in some of the middle tier guys as well. Like Puna Ford made a huge difference to the Chargers defensive line last season as a sort of stout run stopping nose tackle type. The Cardinals, he would upgrade them as well. So like if you hit this with, the marquee spend, whether it's Sweat, whether it's Milton Williams, Adigi Zua, you then add like a mid-level spend in a guy like Puna Ford and hit it with the first round draft pick, whether it's interior or edge. Like I'd be for all of that.
I love that. Oh, that's great. Puna Ford, big fan of him. Think I would. We'll talk about him maybe with the Chargers, and they're probably hoping to get him back. But I would sign Puna Ford every year. He's one of my every year guys as well. Levi Onwuzurike, got to mention him as well as that second wave of free agency possibility here for Arizona that I think would be a really nice fit. So I got to address the offensive line first. What else are you thinking as far as Arizona and what needs to happen this offseason?
Well, yeah, I think you've also got the offensive line as well, which is it's not the defensive line in terms of complete absent of everything, but they don't have guards right now that you can rely on. You've got, I think, 3 of your 5 spots in reasonable shape with the center and the 2 tackles, but this is a team that needs guard help pretty quickly.
So are they in the Tyler Booker in the middle of the first round type of option? I mean, that's where a lot of these guards who aren't elite prospects end up getting mocked a lot of the time.
Well, this is like I think it makes sense to bring back Will Hernandez as one of the spots. I think I saw him bouncing around Radio Row for the Super Bowl. I think he was talking about wanting to be back in Arizona. I mean, that's a fit I think that makes sense for both sides. Hernandez to stay there. Arizona should probably want him back. You still need an upgrade, or you still need a left guard on the other side. I would try and pick that up in free agency, or try and add a body in free agency so that I don't need to do what we just talked about and spend that mid-round or mid-first round pick on a guard. I can go after the defensive line, which will still be a need no matter what we do in free agency. So I would want to try and, find a guard in that mid-tier free agency that I can be reasonably comfortable with starting.
Hernandez coming off injury, I think that'd be a good guy to bring back. He's another one of those. By the way, if you want to feel old, he's heading into year 8, Sam. But remember, him coming out of UTEP. But slow start to his career with the Giants, gotten better with the Cardinals, another one of those classic later type of bloomers for the offensive line. So I think that at least solves one of the problems. The other thing, me and speed for receivers, I think they could use a speed guy, right? Marvin Harrison Jr. might play fast as far as some of the numbers, coming out of college and everything, but he's not a pure burner. Michael Wilson, not really a burner. Greg Dortch, more of a slot, shiftier type of guy. I would love to see just take the top off the defense, deep threat here to complement some of those guys.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Just as a suggestion for my starting guard, Patrick McCarry from the Ravens, who's played like every position in the offensive line, I think is an upcoming free agent. He started at guard last season. He's, I guess, an average player. Like he's got a level, but that dude brings a ton of versatility. And if I need him to start at guard while I'm figuring out the rest of this depth chart, I think he can do that and be a solid player there.
Good suggestion there. I'll throw the Darius Slayton thing out there. Slayton's interesting, Sam, because I don't know if he's going to get wide receiver 2 money for certain teams. I think as a 3, though, as a guy that is just, a vertical type of threat. You mentioned him for Seattle. I'll mention him for Arizona. Like I think that could be a nice fit as far as the speed goes. Draft wise, to add speed, I don't know what he's going to run, but Jalen Knoll from Iowa State looks fast, looks quick. I think he's got some of that vertical presence. That could be a nice, mid-round type of option.
And what about Tez? What about Tez Johnson? He's not necessarily just a vertical speed guy, or not even necessarily that primarily, given how they use him at Oregon. But that's how you project Tez Johnson forward. The Oregon receiver that's like, what was he, 5'9", 155 or something ridiculous? Like projecting him forward is going to be a fascinating decision for teams.
I was looking at him as well. I felt like, is he redundant to Greg Dortch? And maybe I'm just like size profiling too much with those two guys, but I'm down with Tez added to the Marvin Harrison Jr. and Michael Wilson mix. I think that'd be a great addition for Arizona. Good suggestion there. Is that it on the Cardinals? I mean, to me, again, I think it needs to be one of those completely overhaul the defensive line, outside backers, whatever you want to call them, but the pass rushers, run stoppers, those guys up front, the front 7 really needs to be overhauled in Arizona. And they have an opportunity between free agency, the money they have available in the draft to really make it happen here. Great.
The Greg Dortch thing is bugging me because I've been talking about him as a free agent. I see conflicting reports about whether he's actually a free agent or not. Some people are calling him unrestricted. Some people are calling him restricted.
I don't know.
It's unclear.
I see him back on what I'm looking at. So we'll
get
to
I've
the
seen
bottom
it both
of that.
places now. So I'm confused as to what the problem is with his current designation.
By the way, and if you do bring the Barbarian back and last year's first-round pick, Darius Robinson, I think Robinson has great potential. And, I don't know if he's a pure edge. I don't know if he's just this movable guy. I just think I don't trust Darius Robinson to be the leader, right? The one big-time pass rusher that you depend upon. But if there's a Milton Williams or a Josh Sweat, like as part of this rotation where you can create mismatches and everything, Darius Robinson's value goes up. So the more I like the way they say the Chiefs built their defensive line the last couple of years. You have a Chris Jones that can move around. You have a long body in Charles Omenihu. You have the power of George Karlaftis. You have different style players to block. Darius Robinson's value goes up as you get more players that are difficult to block around him with different styles. So I think it's a big opportunity for Arizona to just make the defensive front so much better this offseason.
Yeah, Darius Robinson's rookie season unfortunately provided very little clarity from he was this intriguing prospect where it felt like he was coming into the draft outside of his era. Like if he was coming into the NFL circa 2003, we would be like, he would be, Tyson Jackson was drafted 3 overall or something, right? Like we would be talking about a top 5 draft pick for one of these old school, traditional 3-4 toot gapping type of defenses. He's like the perfect fit for that. But it's not. It's 2024 when he came in. You're like, I don't know where he fits. Is he an interior player? Is he an edge player? Is he some kind of hybrid in these multiple fronts? You're like, well, the Cardinals take him. Let's figure out. And then he gets hurt and misses most of his rookie season. And when he finally gets back, 13, 14 weeks into the season, I don't know that we got a ton of clarity as to how good he's going to be at any of these things. So for a guy who was, I think, one of the more intriguing players just in terms of what he was going to be, I think we got frustratingly little in the way of resolution to that from his rookie season.
The one last thing I just want to add to everything here, cornerback, I think is still a question, but they have a whole lot of young, intriguing talents, whether it's Starling Thomas or Garrett Williams or Max Melton. So they can either stick with that youth movement where they have upside, like those guys could develop, or are they a team where they could bring in a DJ Reed? Like I don't trust Sean Murphy Bunting as an outside corner. Still, it just never really produced there on the outside. Are they a DJ Reed type of team? Carlton Davis type of team, just get at least one veteran corner while some of those other guys are developing and add some depth there. I think that's something else that I would take a look at if I'm Arizona.
Yeah, definitely. If you can get a moderate price guy that you're comfortable starting, I would definitely try and jump all over that if I was them.
Arizona fixed, all starting in the trenches on the defensive line. Let's wrap up the NFC West with the San Francisco 49ers. Interesting spot for the Niners coming off a 6-11 season, a year after making the Super Bowl, and a couple, now we're 2 years removed from them having one of the deepest rosters in the NFL, right? Rolling 8 deep on the defensive line, superstars up and down the roster. And as we head into the offseason, there's questions. You have some of the players that they've locked up, like Deebo Samuel, expected to be on the trading block here. And then other spots that were big moves for the Niners a couple years ago. Javon Hargrave, Travarius Ward, both of those guys, big signings that helped in the Super Bowl run heading to free agency. Dre Greenlaw, who I've mentioned, as an option for other teams heading to free agency. So starting guard Aaron Banks, there's going to be some turnover here for the Niners. And all while this Brock Purdy thing is looming, he heads into the last year of his deal. And so they have to figure out what to do with one of the best bargains in the NFL right now, Brock Purdy.
So that's the thing, first and foremost. Like, that's the first task up for the 49ers offseason is signing Brock Purdy to whatever this extension looks like, which got an awful lot more confusing and muddy based off the season he just had than it would have been if he continued his trajectory and his level of play from when he'd taken over the job. So what are we giving him? What's the contract? Like, I assume both of us are re-signing Brock Purdy. Like, we're not being like, hey, what we saw last year was scary enough that we're just going to go in a new direction. Sorry, Brock. We're both re-signing him, right? Now the question is, to what kind of APY?
I would do it. I think I would do it. It's funny because I talk a lot about if teams leaned into their own schematic advantages, whatever those are, that they should do that, right? And the schematic advantage here, or the team advantage, is having Kyle Shanahan and his ability to win with multiple quarterbacks. So there is like this part of me that's not that you could just throw anybody in there. Like Trey Lance isn't going to win with Kyle Shanahan, but my man's won with Matt Schaub won a lot with Matt Schaub and elevated Matt Ryan to MVP and Jimmy Garoppolo and Brock Purdy. Like, there's a history here, Give him Dylan Gabriel or whoever the next guy is. There is this world, right, where you could say, because of Kyle Shanahan, we can live in rookie quarterback world forever and then build all the superstars around them the way they did the last 4 years. There is a world where that's an option, but it's easier said than done. I'm just saying, this is like a discussion that can happen in the building. We have Kyle Shanahan. We can live in this world of rotating quarterbacks and never having to really pay the guy. The alternative to that is, I think Purdy's good. I think he's good and good for Kyle Shanahan. And I think the potential is high, right? When we talk about potential for quarterbacks, we think about Anthony Richardson because he throws fast and runs fast. I think Purdy's potential is still high to run that system, get the ball to playmakers, make plays inside and outside of structure. I think the ceiling is still high for Brock Purdy as a player. And when you pair him with Kyle Shanahan, I'm willing to pay the money. Now, I don't want to pay him 60 and reset the market. I would pay him Tua money. I'd rather pay him Tua money and say, look, you're the Tua for this operation here. You're not generational. And so you're going to have that conversation with Brock's agent, who happens to be a colleague. He might be listening right now, and hopefully he's not mad if we're talking down Brock's value here.
Well, you are. I'm not. I think, see, this is the thing. I think, yeah, look, we can all acknowledge that Kyle Shanahan has a positive impact on the quarterbacks that play for him, but I think there's a massive leap between that and we can just go to the next guy. Like, I think that hugely undersells the contributing part of Brock Purdy to this whole thing. Like, Brock Purdy, I think, has clearly demonstrated that he is not simply a Mr. Irrelevant who happened to stumble into Kyle Shanahan, and now he's got, we're not waiting for the pumpkin or for him to turn back into a pumpkin. I think if he went somewhere else, he would still be good, maybe not as good, but like, I don't think you can just hope that, oh, wait, we get rid of Brock Purdy, we're bringing Dylan Gabriel, we'll get more or less the same production, and we go again. And we just do that every time a rookie quarterback contract comes due. They found something fortuitously in Brock Purdy, and you then get to add, the Shanahan factor on top of that, and that's why they've been challenging. Now, I also think it's fair to say, because of the Shanahan factor, should Brock Purdy's contract get discounted a little bit? And I think if the world was fair, the answer to that question would be yes, but it isn't. And his agent has no interest in that argument. His agent is like, this is the guy that's doing this, so he deserves the money. So that's where it becomes really interesting, because Dak Prescott's contract is the one that is setting the marketplace, right? And Dak Prescott is another guy who has some of those arguments as well, in terms of, can Dak Prescott be Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson? Not really. Like, he can be really good, and he can be, he can lead a league-leading offense if everything around him is good, in the same way Tua can. But, like, he should be in the second tier of quarterback contracts on merit. But he isn't, because that's the way his deal got done. That's the way Jerry Jones dragged the ass out of the negotiations and boxed himself into a corner. Point being, that set the precedent. So if you're Brock Purdy's agent, you are coming with demands that start with a 6 as an APY, right? The number begins at 60, and we discuss from there. If you're the 49ers, do you draw a line in the sand financially, or are you just stuck having to pay $60 million a year because that's what the precedent is?
I think they're probably paying 60. I would try to make the Tua discussion. Right.
Of course.
The stats are similar. And, I'm friends with Mike. Yeah, I would try to make that argument. It probably lands at 58 to 60 or whatever it is. But I would probably do it. I think the big issue for the Niners here, Sam, for a team that went through this cycle of unbelievable drafting and then shrewd moves like trading for Trent Williams, they didn't give up a whole lot for Trent Williams to get an all-world left tackle, which is why we were citing for years. And you hit on a George Kittle, right? We were citing for years. They have the best left tackle, tight end, running back with McCaffrey, fullback, one of the top 3 edge, best linebacker. I mean, they have the best of everything. And that's starting to fall apart just a little bit. A lot of those players are still there, but they're getting older, more expensive, whatever it might be. But the Niners are in this spot heading into this year where they have holes. They need a starting linebacker, safety, corner, Javon Hargrave, free agent, defensive tackle. They have a lot of pieces to fill. And I think it's as simple as reversing 3 years and saying, how well have they drafted? And they haven't added a whole lot in the draft since 2021, I would say, 2020. Like, they went through this run of, just looking through it, Nick Bosa, Deebo Samuel, Dre Greenlaw, Mike McGlinchey, Fred Warner, DJ Reed. Like, they all came to the team within 2 years. Yeah. Right. And this is why we talk a lot about, just because your team has drafted well the last 2 or 3 years doesn't mean they will the next 2 or 3 years. The last few years have netted how many starters for this team, or even potential starters? Maybe D Winters at linebacker is going to start this year next to Fred Warner. Is that it? That's about it. Dominic Pooney, good pick last year. Renardo Green, probably. It was a rough few years where I think that's where we're sitting here with the Niners in a spot where they have a lot to backfill here.
Yeah, I mean, we've said that for a while, right? Like, they're a weird mix of, they have had some extremely good draft picks, and Brock Purdy, right? They made one of the worst moves personnel wise in draft history in trading the farm to go up and get Trey Lance, because they thought that was what was going to turbocharge this Shanahan offense and, add a whole layer of like RG3 rookie season plus, inflated, adjusted for inflation, et cetera, completely whiff on that. Trey Lance looks like a disaster and has never gotten better, like no matter where he's gone or what he's done. Completely rescued by the fact that they stumble ass backwards into Brock Purdy with literally the last pick in the draft. So they've been rescued by a couple of like super high value draft picks. But then you have drafts like 2023 or okay, they didn't pick before the third round, but they then had like 3 consecutive picks at the end of the third round, plus, whatever it was, 5, 6 more in that draft, which have produced nothing, like nothing. And not only nothing, but like the 3 third round picks. Okay, the third round is not like you're not expecting to get superstars out of the third round, but you can get useful contributing players fairly regularly from the third, right? Kobe Turner, right, was a third round draft pick. Like there's a lot of high impact third round players. They drafted a safety that confused people who's not been good, a kicker who's been atrocious and is only still in the job because they spent a third round draft pick on him, and a backup tight end who was a backup tight end like in college. This was not somebody that, was an elite tight end who's become a backup. Like those were 3 head scratching picks at the time, which have been proven to have been head scratching after the fact. So drafts like that are killing them. Like this is a team that spent whatever that was, 10 draft picks and got nothing for it.
Yeah,
they can't.
And I want to be clear. Like the last draft, 24, was pretty good, but it's the previous ones. Like when we're talking about guys that should be getting into years 3, 4, and 5 of their career and in their prime, that's not setting the organization back necessarily, but that's why they're sitting here with holes to fill. So I think they've got more work to do. Right, a couple of years ago, they were in a great spot because that's when Debo and Bosa and all those guys were in their prime, not getting paid a ton. So now they're figuring out, how do I pay all these guys, hope that they don't drop off. They just have to hit on, like they need it's an important draft, man. They got to hit on another draft. And so I think that's just where they are. And that's where they're going to be for the next couple of years. They're drafting high though. They're at pick 11 here, right? And they might be in the tackle market to future proof for Trent Williams. They have a lot of picks. I think this is, for all the teams in the NFL, one of the most important drafts because of the volume of draft picks that San Francisco has and the idea and all of these stars needing to get paid. So where are we going to go with some of these options here?
Yeah, I think they're another team where defensive line makes a ton of sense in that first round. I mean, I forget who it was. Whoever's mock draft, was it Phil Yates's mock draft we were looking through, who had like basically a third of the first round was defensive linemen, right? So you're going to, like, basically every team that's picking, like, this is a good value spot for the defensive line. It's because basically everywhere in the first round is good value for the defensive line. You've got genuinely elite defensive line talents like, Mason Graham, who's a top 5 caliber draft pick, all the way down to the guys that make sense, at the bottom of the first round and into the second round and all the way through the first round. So whether you're picking 11, 18, 26, like all these places are good value spots for the defensive line. The 49ers, I think it's true. Their issue is outside of Nick Bosa, who was basically a slam dunk, can't miss, home run type of draft pick, they have drafted badly on the defensive line for a long time now. Like they've swung at it a few times and have missed almost invariably, whether it's edge rushers like Drake Jackson, whether it's interior players like Javon Kinlaw. This is one they can't screw up. Like they need this guy. If they draft the defensive lineman at 11, this needs to hit.
The Kinlaw one does hurt. You're right. They have missed a lot, but I think we're not saying that means they won't hit the next time. It just means they're in the spot where right now it's Nick Bosa and not a whole lot of depth because they've missed on some of those picks. I would love to see that spot for James Pierce. Walter Nolan's being mentioned in the chat. I'm good with any of those types of players.
Mike Green,
Michael Williams. Mike Green, I was going to say Mike Green opposite Nick Bosa would be outstanding. So let's go that way in the first round. Best defensive lineman available here for the Niners. I would love to see them bring Dre Greenlaw back. I don't know if they go that route with D. Winters there. I think he showed some good stuff last year next to Fred Warner. They're another team. I think the corner depth in this draft, I think there'll be some options in rounds 2 and 3 where they need somebody to come in and compete opposite Renardo Green, who did a nice job as a rookie. Left guard Aaron Banks is a free agent. So they've got a few holes to fill on both sides of the ball here.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is a team all of a sudden that needs some work, and they're about to be squeezed because of this Brock Purdy contract that they're probably going to have to give him.
They have cap space
for the moment.
Sign Purdy, right? That's going to take up a chunk. You're going to move money around. Last thing, trade Deebo Samuel.
I think they're going to end up cutting him. I don't know that anyone's going to want to make that trade.
Is his value just so much higher for the Niners versus other teams? Not because he plays running back sometimes, but just because they have other pieces and they fit him in well, screen game and just getting him the ball in space.
Yeah, and it's like he's on that healthy contract. He's getting up there in age now. He's got some serious wear on the clock, given given the role that he's had, given his injury history, etc. I feel like they're going to end up cutting him rather than trading him. I think if they do it with a post June 1st designation, it saves them. There's 10 million of dead space, but it actually saves them some money against the cap. Whereas if they do it pre June 1st, it's a hit.
It just spreads it out. It's 31 million overall dead. I think they keep Debo
but
at the
it
end
frees
of the day.
up 5 million of space this year, and there'll be freed up space next year as well. In a world where again that becomes more important with Brock Purdy signing a contract.
Man, I think they got to keep him.
But he wants out. They've already I don't think keeping him is an option. I think your two options are trade or cut.
The problem with players demanding trades, man, it really hamstrings the team because over $30 million dead cap, no matter what, whether you spread it out over multiple years or if it's just in one swoop, it's not really a great option for either.
But I think the 49ers are stuck now with three options, which is find somebody that wants to trade for him, and I don't know if there's one of those teams out there, or are we pre or post June 1st cut, which, as you said, that's just a decision of do we eat all the dead cap space this year or do we spread it out over 2 years?
Yeah.
To me, the most likely of those three is you cut him with a post June 1st designation, you spread the pain out over 2 years, you get some cap savings right now, and that's the best of a bad option.
I guess I'd have to trade him. The dead cap still gets you with the trade too, but
yeah,
I would think trade.
And you have to find someone that wants to take on that contract.
All right, did we fix the Niners? Or just lay out all their problems? Double up on defensive line with all those picks. I mean, hit on those draft picks. Defensive linemen, I'd say corner depth, and those are the ways you're going.
Is there anyone of their free agents that you said you'd try potentially to bring back Greenlaw, but they have a guy waiting. Would you Charvarius Ward as a good quality starting corner who's presumably going to be hitting reasonably high-end money in free agency? Is there anyone else you would try and bring back?
I would see what the market is for Aaron Banks, just because he's the known commodity there at guard. I think they could handle, moving on there. I would look at Charvarius Ward though. I like him a lot as a player. I think they have the ability to play press man with him and Renardo Green as a 1-2 punch. I think there's a lot of options there, but it might not. I mean, there's some corner depth. I think where they're drafting that they could also replace him. But Ward, I think, is most intriguing, other than Dre Greenlaw,
right?
Who I think they let go. All right. Good job on the 49ers here. Got to tell you about our friends over at Timeline. Check the mic. Brought to you by our friends at Timeline. Get 10% off your order of MitoPure at timeline.com using code Check the Mic at checkout. MitoPure is a supplement that can help you because it encourages cellular renewal. It works by promoting an essential cellular cleanup process that clears out dysfunctional mitochondria, aka your cell's battery packs. There are no supplements on the market that have better clinical research shown to be effective at targeting the effects of age-related cellular decline. With regular use, you'll see and feel the difference in the form of improved energy levels, better workouts, faster recovery, more endurance, and more. In fact, MitoPure is shown to deliver double-digit increases in muscle strength and endurance without a change in exercise. So this is your year to be your best, most energized, most revitalized, so you can awaken the strength, power, and resilience already in you with the first and only supplement clinically proven to rejuvenate health at the cellular level. Again, Timeline's offering 10% off your order of MitoPure. Go to timeline.com Let's do this again. Timeline.com, promo code is Check the Mic over at timeline.com, timeline.com, promo code Check the Mic. I told you I'd read exactly what was there, Ben. And there it is. Read it. Let's go to the AFC West. Let's fix the Chiefs.
All right.
How are we going to fix the Chiefs? One game away from a three-peat. We got to fix the Chiefs. It's an interesting offseason. I've seen Chiefs fans discuss a lot about this is like the next phase of the Mahomes era here, right? We had the Tyreek Hill phase. We had the reset and the rebuild where they traded Tyreek Hill, got younger, put a lot of resources into the defense, and they won 2 championships out of that phase. And now it's the next reset here of the Chiefs era. They have several free agents on the defensive line. They've got some offensive line issues that certainly popped up in the Super Bowl. What's next here for the Kansas City Chiefs?
Yeah, it's funny. Like we did the Eagles, at the start of this, and it's like, how do you fix a team that just won a championship and looks like they have one of the best rosters in the NFL? Whereas the Chiefs, it's like they came up one game short, but actually, you look at this roster and like, this is not an easy needle to thread. They've got quite a few holes emerging on this roster. Like this is suddenly, it's nowhere near as good a situation, I think, as the Eagles going forward. Even though those were the two Super Bowl teams. You've got like key pieces on both sides of the ball hitting free agency, at least theoretically. Trey Smith, obviously at guard on the offensive side, receivers like Marquise Brown, who never really got to feature much this season because of injury. Tershawn Wharton, rather, on the defensive line, Nick Bolton at linebacker, Justin Reed at safety. Like, there's some pretty key pieces of this team scheduled to hit free agency, and this is not a team that is swimming in cap space.
And they have 5 draft picks in Kansas City. So I think
Five,
the left.
Let's six, start. I think.
Oh man, I see 5. Misinformation everywhere.
It really is. It's amazing how difficult it is to hammer down like basic key facts about the draft. It's out there. It's nuts.
The PFF MDS has 5. Anthony
Tankathon has 6. They have Tennessee's draft pick in the 3rd round as well.
Anthony has them with 7 in our document here.
7?
Yeah.
They got somewhere between 5 and 7 draft picks.
Somewhere in there. Either way, let's start with left tackle. I mean, the history there of the last couple of years kind of going the veteran route. They had Donovan Smith, and we've talked a lot about how I think the offense, when you have the weak left tackle spot, that has coincided with their worst games, right? And off the top of your head, like Christmas Day against the Raiders a couple years ago, and against the Browns this past year, where Mahomes had one of his worst games, and then the Super Bowl where, look, Joe Thuney's held up pretty well for a guard, but you had issues up front, right? So they've tried to draft there. They've tried to go the developmental tackle route. Wanye Morris in the 3rd, Kingsley Suamataia last year in the 2nd. Like those guys probably need opportunities just because they're invested pretty heavily in the draft to at least fit in somewhere. I saw Jeff Schwartz saying maybe Kingsley moves to guard, or they got to figure something out, a way to maybe maximize those guys. But either way, I think the left tackle spot needs to be solved this offseason.
Yeah, it does. But the question is like, how do you want to attack that? I mean, do you go and try and invest? Like the Chiefs are fascinating because the Super Bowl was really the first time since the last Super Bowl where they got wrecked by Tampa Bay on a major scale, where that kind of problem has surfaced again. The last time that happened to them, coming out of that Tampa Bay game, number one, it was basically an entire backup offensive line. So I think it made more sense. Like there was more of an explanation for it. And yet they still, like their reaction to that was spend huge on free agency, make Joe Thuney the best played guard in the NFL, was to like go big, investing in that offensive line to ensure that never happened again, only for it to happen again a few years later. But like, do they do the same thing? Like, are they going to have the same sort of intensity of reaction coming out of that game to ensure that left tackle is not that problem again? Or do they stay much more measured and say, look, that was bad. We just need to make sure we're not so bad at left tackle that kind of thing happens, and target, so instead of going and throwing the bag at Ronnie Stanley to try and make sure that left tackle is fixed, do we try and go lower level, bring in a Cam Robinson, say, at a lower level, or just spend less at that and try and fix it without going crazy?
Yeah, I think they at least have to discuss that. Now, the Chiefs' cap space is only around $15 million right now. That's with Mahomes right now scheduled to have a cap hit of $66 million this year, $68 million next year. Like that's going to get restructured, I think, this year. He's not going to take up 23% of the cap. I think they'll move money around. So I don't think they're completely hamstrung from a cap space perspective.
Right.
There was talk about a transition tag on Trey Smith, by the way. That's their spot at right guard. So when we're talking offensive line, I'll circle back to left tackle in a minute. Do they make it a point to try to keep that maybe the best interior in the NFL together? Joe Thuney, Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith. Do they at least try to keep that together for a little bit with a transition tag on Trey Smith? We know teams can match. It's not a true franchise tag necessarily. they can match offers and we could just see if they could steal him for another year or two there. That's a possibility, but I do wonder how much they say, let's solve left tackle before we put all the money back into right guard, so to speak. And so,
I mean, I'd certainly be open to giving it a shot. When we talked when we were fixing the Patriots have the kind of money and motivation to match an offer or make an offer rather to Trey Smith that the Chiefs can't match. So you can take a swing at it, right? Let's put the transition tag on it. Let's at least give ourselves a chance of keeping him. But I would imagine it won't be successful. Like, it feels to me like a team can and should match the kind of offer that the Chiefs or beat an offer that the Chiefs can put out there.
So I think they have to at least explore Ronnie Stanley and Cam Robinson. If Ronnie Stanley does hit the market, they have to at least explore that and say, okay, if we're going to invest the money, we're going to do it at, Creed Humphrey's going to get paid at center soon.
Yeah.
Joe Thuney at left guard. This is what's tricky, right? Tooney's already making a ton of money. Jawan Taylor at right tackle is already making a ton of money. Creed Humphrey's next. He's the best center in the NFL, and he's at 18. Can you pay a left tackle too? Can you pay four guys, basically 16 plus million per year? That's the challenge.
Well, this is why I think the Ronnie Stanley thing would be sort of a knee-jerk overreaction move, whereas the smarter thing would be to try and aim lower than that, but still upgrade the position. Like, if you end up, I think Ronnie Stanley's going to get paid pretty healthily. This changes, obviously, if the market isn't there and it's softer than you think it is, and suddenly you can just be opportunistic about it the way the Bengals were with Orlando Brown. But, like, if Stanley's going to command pretty high-end tackle money, I don't know that you can afford to do that given what you've got already, given the holes that are emerging, given you're going to need to pay a Creed Humphrey going forward. I think you have to aim lower than that and try and fix it for a cheaper investment.
So where does that go? Who do you think?
I think Cam Robinson would be the guy I would be targeting from that potential group.
Man, Cam might get paid.
Maybe.
Cam, he might get paid the way the market is. Sorry, and I know Creed Humphrey, just to clarify in the chat, I know Creed Humphrey got paid last year. So I'm saying they already have the money in Creed, Thuney, and Jawan Taylor. And so it is tough to put a ton of money at left tackle, which is why they've tried to draft and develop. The other part is, like, do you go Tyron Smith for a Band-Aid for a year?
But if,
dealing with the injury concerns, whatever it might be.
So at the moment you have, 3/5 of your offensive line getting paid significant money. The fourth fifth is an upcoming free agent that you're talking about putting a transition tag on. And then the fifth is the one position that you need to fix, right? So you're either talking about making a financial commitment that makes the entire offensive line one of the best paid players in the league at their position, which is basically impossible to do financially. Like, in addition to, your quarterback is already getting paid significant money. Like, you can't create a roster that way. Or you have to at least determine which one of these are we not paying the big money to, right? Or both. So either Trey Smith is on his way out and the transition tag thing is a pipe dream, or you have to try and save some money with the left tackle upgrade that you're making, which I would say rules you out of Ronnie Stanley. Maybe it rules you out of Cam Robinson as well. And then you're kind of grasping around trying to find a left tackle that you think can start without breaking the bank.
And the reason why the Chiefs have gone this developmental tackle route the last few years is because of this, right? Because they haven't been able to invest heavily at that spot. If they go that path again, consensus board right now has Josh Connerly from Oregon at 30, Arante Ursary from Minnesota at 38, Cameron Williams from Texas, who's a right tackle, at 46. They could go back down that path. Wyatt Millum, who I thought might be a first rounder, but kind of struggled at the Senior Bowl, he's down at 66. They could go down that path again, but I don't think they want to play that game, right? I think this is an overcorrect type of year. But I don't know if they have the pieces to really do that and invest. You can't invest that much money maybe in 4/5 of the offensive line. It's going to be a challenge.
Well, this is what I'm saying. Like, it's a pretty narrow needle to thread for the Chiefs now, because they've got significant problems to try and fix without an overabundance of cash to make it happen. I mean, the Tyron Smith thing you mentioned, it would be an interesting attempt to fix it. The Jets did that, and then they drafted a replacement knowing that the chances are Tyron Smith is not playing. the entire season, and that was true. I mean, that was borne out. He didn't make it through the season. So for a team like Kansas City, who expects to be in the AFC Championship game at a minimum, you have to budget in the idea of, okay, if Tyron Smith is the fix, he's not the fix for 20 games. He might be the fix for 15, but you don't know which 15, right? If the 5 you're without him are the weeks 17, 18, and the playoff run, that's a problem.
I might play that game, though. Try to get Tyron Smith for a year and still maybe draft somebody at 31, another developmental guy, and just go back to that same well that hasn't necessarily worked. But Sua Mataya, he's just a rookie. Like, we don't know if he's going to get better. So, but just keep adding resources. It's that important for them.
If you brought in Tyron Smith, knowing what we know about his chances of injury, would you even play him before November?
Sit him. Yeah, you sit him in like the middle of the year, give him a break, and then ramp him up for the playoffs and everything.
Like, genuinely play him like an NBA player's, load management or whatever they call that crap, right? Like, let's give Sua Mataya the first month of the season. Like, Sua Mataya plays left tackle for September, right? Then maybe once if that's going badly or whatever, then we get Tyron Smith. Like, let's just ease him into the season, right? Let's get him some October playing time, a little bit here or there, and then maybe Sua Mataya comes back in for November. And then once we hit December, then we start to ramp up Tyron Smith's playing time. We ease him in, let's get him half the game. And then by weeks 16, 17, he's full-time starter. And then hopefully he can just survive for 6 games, and that's it.
That's what I'm doing. Let's go that route. The other part that needs to be attacked, there's 3-ish starters, depending on where you have Deshaun Wharton, Nick Bolton, Justin Reed, all free agents on the defensive side of the ball. But it's really Charles Omenihu, Mike Pennell, Derek Nottie, like all those guys free agents. Defensive line needs an influx of talent here because they like to rotate a lot. They roll deep. They have all those different body types. That's been great for them the last couple of years. I think this definitely needs to get addressed this offseason. Yeah,
and because they're multiple, I would be intrigued in trying to keep one of Wharton or Omenihu. Omenihu might be a good kind of, I wonder what his market's going to be like, because I think he's a very good player, but he's missed like significant chunks of multiple seasons in the last couple of years. So that might artificially depress his value. And I wonder if you're the Chiefs, if you can be like, well, look, you didn't kind of give us what you were supposed to give us the last couple of years through no fault of your own, but like let's do this properly this time, right? Like we'll re-sign you, keep you in the building, and hopefully we'll get like actually full participation of Omenihu now.
I would love to get Omenihu back, and then I think all the defensive linemen in the late first. I know we were talking about maybe I think they're debating. I think it looks like a potential tackle or defensive lineman, right? And I think, look, I love Jack Sawyer as a player. He's currently 36th on the consensus board. I don't know what he's going to test like. I think that'll be a thing, but I think he's a fringe first round type. That would be good to get in the building there. Nick Scourton, where he ends up falling or landing as far as, for Texas A&M, I think expectations were that he was going to be closer to the top 10 coming into this year. He kind of disappointed a little bit. I think there will be value in the back end of the first round, like there is for a lot of teams on the defensive line here.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, another team where it might make sense to try and hit both an edge rusher and an interior player with those first couple of picks.
Derek Harmon, too, by the way, currently 34 on the consensus board, the Oregon defensive tackle. I think he's got some issues in the run game, pad level type stuff, but he is a really good pass rusher. And if you pair him with Chris Jones, I mean, I think they can get back on track on the defensive line pretty quickly with some of these picks.
Yeah, and if you lose maybe one or both of Tershawn Wharton and Charles Omenihu, Omar Norman Lott, the Tennessee defensive lineman, is getting a ton of buzz and has a really impressive pass rushing profile. Again, maybe a one-dimensional guy as a pass rusher versus a run stuffer, but that fits that missing, like that those snaps that are going out the door of Omenihu and Wharton theoretically could be replaced by a guy like Norman Lott.
I would also say the other positions, guard, Nick Bolton at linebacker, Justin Reed at safety. I mean, they're lower value positions, and I think you just kind of play that game, get the second, third wave of free agency, play the waiver wire. I think you could fill those spots fine. To me, this offseason has to be make sure the tackle spot gets solved, defensive line depth, and then the other thing to touch on is the receiving core with Marquise Brown was just in for the 1 year. DeAndre Hopkins is out. So you still have that nice nucleus of Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy, but you have an aging Travis Kelce as well. Like, how do you make sure that the playmakers are staying in a pretty good spot moving forward?
That's key. And I think there's an overall sort of philosophy question about what this offense is going to be. I think that's why, people are talking about this as the next phase of this Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid thing that, you had the initial wildly explosive, wildly dangerous offense with Tyreek Hill and all these crazy playmakers. And then you had the let's pivot to more of a ball control type of offense. And then you had whatever last year was, which is like making do with the pieces that we have. Like the ones we thought we were going to have weren't really there. So now you've got, Xavier Worthy's there. Obviously, your former first-round pick, speedster. You've got Rashee Rice coming back next year off that incredible knee injury that he suffered. Pacheco should be healthy again. But Travis Kelce, looks like an aging shadow of himself. Who knows if he decides it's time to retire and walk away after that Super Bowl. Either way, you start needing to very much craft a new offense again, and figure out exactly what this is going to look like. So Worthy's a good piece. Rashee Rice should be a good piece if he comes back healthy. But that's, you still need that's a serious work in progress to still get to like the next iteration of this offense.
The late second round, there might be some good value there. The way this receiver board falls, Jalen Royals right now is currently at 64 in the consensus board. I know you're certainly higher on him. I like Jaden Higgins from Iowa State. They're like in that range consensus board wise. I think there's probably good receiver value when the Chiefs pick in the second round. So I would keep an eye on that as a potential option just to add depth there. And Rashee Rice coming off the injury, just make sure you've got that position future-proofed. And then it is a good tight end year. It is a good year if we're talking, look into the future to replace Travis Kelce. Harold Fannin Jr., get him in there as the next pass-catching tight end for Patrick
Bowling
Mahomes.
Green's finest.
I think I could see it. All right, did we solve all of the Chiefs' many issues?
Mike Renner was tweeting the other day that like he thinks tight end might be the strongest position group in this entire draft at a year or at a time where tight end has generally not been a strength of most drafts. Like finding tight ends has been a struggle for a while now, outside of some significant exceptions. So somebody mentioned Arroyo from Miami previously. You just mentioned Fannin from Bowling Green. Terrence Ferguson from Oregon would be an interesting one. He showed out at the Senior Bowl, making some nice plays. Like I think there's going to be a lot of options there. I think they should absolutely add one of those guys.
Yeah, I like Mason Taylor from LSU, Oronde Gadsden, the second. He's a wide receiver convert, wide receiver-ish type of body that we call a tight end. So there's a lot of those options in this draft. I think they'll at least be looking at tight end here. All right, let's go to the Chargers. Coming off of a very good year, but a disappointing playoff run here. Disappointing playoff game against the Houston Texans. Chargers, Jim Harbaugh's first year. A lot of our offseason debates last year were like, hey, they had to move on from some contracts. They had to move on from receivers. Do we build up the offensive line or the receiving core? At pick number 5, they went with Joe Alt at tackle. Got Ladd McConkey on the turn. I think they played that game perfectly. But as you watch the Chargers this year, I think the big question mark was, okay, we neglected receiver a little bit last year. Hit on McConkey. Got to go back there and have some more pass catchers, both at tight end and at receiver, to complement McConkey and give Herbert a few more weapons outside.
Yeah, I think that's the offseason for them. It's just getting weaponry. And not just a receiver, though that's the most obvious and biggest weakness. The running back as well. I mean, J.K. Dobbins moved the needle for them this season when he was out there, when he's not. Maybe you could bring him back on the cheap because that injury profile, I would imagine, limits the kind of contract anybody's going to give him. But even then, I don't know that you can rely on him being healthy. So I would, maybe bring back J.K. Dobbins, but also still be looking to draft somebody in a good running back draft. Tight end, you could still invest in. Will Disley's fine, but he's not great. So I would literally spend the offseason just acquiring receivers, tight ends, and running backs for this offense, and let's really go somewhere.
I am with you, man. I think the Chargers, and we'll talk about the Broncos in a minute, are they the most common tight end pick for the first round, the Colston Loveland and Tyler Warren pick? I think they're in there, right, as far as potential first-round tight end. I think first-round receiver. should be in play here. Luther Burden, maybe for the Chargers,
Yeah.
but I'd love to see high draft picks on pass catchers here for the Chargers.
Yeah, I like Burden a lot. Yeah, the most common Chargers pick, according to the PFF mock draft sim, is Colson Loveland, the tight end from Michigan.
They also have a lot of cap space at the moment. Normal haul of draft picks. So there's a lot of good potential here for the Chargers. They have to Khalil Mack's a free agent, Joey Bosa potentially getting cut. So I think it's also defensive line offseason. Poona Ford as a free agent, would love to see them bring him back. But those are a couple high value positions that need to be attacked this offseason: pass catcher and then the defensive line.
I think they're players in that defensive line free agent group as well, right? Whether it's Josh Sweat, more likely, I think, or maybe more intense of a need is the interior. Again, they're a team that had Poona Ford last year, made a big difference. They should try and bring him back. And if not, they're going to need a Poona Ford replacement in addition to just any impact player on the defensive line. Like right now, it's Joey Bosa, who has been hurt a lot in the last few years and not very much else. Tuli Tuipulotu as well, but like they need reinforcements on that defensive line, and they have the cash to spend. And I think the free agent defensive line group is a lot stronger than the free agent pass catcher group and running back group. So I think they should try and attack defensive line in free agency, bring back Poona Ford. Maybe they're a team to try and get Milton Williams or Odigizua or Onwuzurike. Maybe they're a team in the Josh Sweat sweepstakes, but hit that in free agency with the cap space they have, and then just rely on the draft for the skill position players that you're going to need.
What if we talk a lot about the deep defensive line draft. Why the Chargers could be in that market as well, given where they're drafting defensive line, and then maybe get the receivers in the second and third. As much as I would love to see a Luther Burden, maybe that second wave of receiver is the way to go in the draft, and they draft one of those defensive linemen high. Again, if James Pierce falls and some of those guys that I think have top 10 potential end up going a little bit lower than expected, I think the Chargers could absolutely be in that market as well.
Definitely, but it's just there's nobody in terms of the skill position players where you want to really throw the money in free agency. So in terms of allocation of resources, like I think you would want to use the cash to get the defensive linemen and then use the draft picks to get the guys that simply aren't available in free agency.
Let me give you one fit that might not happen, but I know you watched a lot of Jalen Walker from Georgia the other day, and his skill set of being able to track down quarterbacks. Like he could rush the passer, played off ball linebacker, unbelievable in a spy role for Georgia. I mentioned that his highlight reel play that everybody's going to show is him tracking down Arch Manning on a scramble against Texas. I'm not saying you draft a guy just to beat Patrick Mahomes, but the type of player that can keep the quarterback in the pocket, play a little spy, make sure you don't get that back-breaking scramble against you, and create some pressure. Jalen Walker feels like a really good fit for this division where the goal is obviously knock off the Chiefs.
Yeah, and he's also a genuinely intriguing. He kind of is a hybrid player. Like he's not just a guy who's, like he's playing two different positions and he's playing both of them pretty well. And okay, when you watch the sort of negatives, like all of the mental lapses are at off the ball linebacker, but the guy's barely played football, period, let alone, one of these positions long term. So it kind of makes sense that there's some mental screw ups there. But like you could deploy him as a genuine hybrid in the NFL as well, as opposed to, is he an edge rusher? Is he a linebacker? Like we've been kind of tossing around comps or guys that have played that sort of thing in the past. Denver did it for a while with Von Miller, right, where he was like a two-down Sam linebacker who then became an edge rusher. The Patriots with Dante Hightower. You mentioned the Patriots with Jamie Collins. There are teams that have done this previously, and I think the NFL now is possibly skewing in a direction where those guys would make more sense than they have in the past. The Flores tree with guys like Van Ginkel and Dallas Turner, like it's a bit different, but this defense I was about to say San Diego, in Los Angeles with the Chargers, like they could potentially deploy him as a legitimate hybrid player as opposed to just defensive line reinforcements or, a situational guy. Like he could stay as that kind of dual threat weapon.
Kelly over here my wife, purposely always calls them the San Diego Chargers. And I say, you got to stop doing that because I'll misspeak on the podcast. So she keeps messing with me. She only calls them San Diego. So
nice.
glad you fell first. There are other needs for the Chargers. I mean, I think they're in prime spot, whether it is on the D line or maybe the way the receivers fall in the first round to get a valuable player there. The secondary also, Asante Samuel Jr. hits free agency and fairly young as well. Christian Fulton, Elijah Molden got hurt after they got him pretty cheap last year. I would try to get him back as a starting safety, but cornerback is also a need. And so the Chargers could be in that market as well, where I think mid first and into the second round is pretty good cornerback value. So there is a lot of work to do for the Chargers. They have the resources, and it's going to be about figuring out how to properly deploy that. I like your idea though of spend on the defensive line, and then we could maybe draft those pass catchers and corners that we need, and fill out the roster that way.
Yeah, I mean, so guys that I would love to see for them. I think the Colson Loveland pick does make a lot of sense in the first round at tight end. Luther Burden, I would really like to see in that offense as well. I think that guy's got some amazing skills as a receiver. Like his comps are interesting because you can kind of see them, but I think he's a little bit different to those. Like I've seen him comp to what's his name? The Kadarius Toney. I've seen him comp to Kadarius Toney. He sort of reminded me a little bit of like a bigger version of Zay Flowers, like just that insane quick twitch, short area, a lot of gimmicky type stuff. But I think his like real wide receiver reps are certainly more clean than Kadarius Toney's. Yeah. I think he has potentially more outside versatility than Zay Flowers does as well because of the size. Like he's got some really intriguing tape. Like there's projection involved, but I like him a lot. But he'd be interesting there. As running back, Travion Henderson sort of feels like what J.K. Dobbins was when he was healthy. If you could get that player in this offense, like that home run hitter who can find a crease and boom, go the distance, Travion Henderson in the second or the third round would be pretty interesting.
Trying to find my Travion notes. I was kind of surprised at Travion's tape after watching him just generally throughout the season, whatever. He's just really dependable and gets what's there, and then also can hit the home runs. I think that could be a really nice fit. I think that's a good shout for the Chargers. So I think there's a lot of work to do here, Sam, but I think, again, they've got the resources to fill those pieces. And I think we've given a few options here as far as pass catchers, defensive line, running back. The one we haven't talked about is corner, and I wouldn't hate if they were in the cornerback market and, got one of those first round injured corners as well.
First round injured.
We've given them a lot of first rounders here, the Chargers. Are they fixed?
Yeah.
Great. 2 more teams, and I got to get to my haircut here. So this is we got to be on track here. Denver Broncos. Is Perna still here? We'll just take whatever Perna says for the Broncos. Coming off of a great season here, Sam. I wasn't expecting it. They felt like they were in a rebuild. They make their playoff run. They look like they hit on Bo Nix. Really impressive job by Sean Payton and George Payton. Everybody putting it all together. The Paytons. Different spellings.
All of a sudden, I looked at this roster and I'm like, man, this is a good team, top to bottom. Like Bo Nix coming in, playing well. This is a pretty good team, top to bottom. Like there are not that many holes in this roster that need filling.
So it's one of the challenges in doing what we do here is because you look at the depth chart, you look at the 2 deep, you look at who's available or who's leaving. And last year at this time with the Broncos, like nobody was looking at Nick Bonito and saying, yeah, slam dunk, good player, don't have to worry about it. We were still like, hey man, he's heading into year 3 and hasn't really put it all together. He's probably a rotational rusher at best. And then all of a sudden he has an outstanding season, and you get good play from Jonathan Cooper, and you see the way they put it all together and got really 7 and 8 deep rushing the passer. And it was a full team effort where there was no real stars. You could argue Bonito in the second half of the year was a star, but it was a full team effort with the way they put it all together. So that's why I think it looks like a pretty good roster. And then the receiving core, it's like, all right, Devon Vele, they hit on him in the 7th round as a nice possession type receiver, right? They hit on some players and had some players develop, and all of a sudden it's like, yeah, the Broncos are good and, a couple players away from really elevating this roster even more.
Yeah,
That's where
like
they are.
it really is. You look at the team, and you're like, there's not that many spaces that need to be upgraded, and areas that we thought were weaknesses a year ago might not be. Wide receiver is still a question mark. Cortland Sutton looks really good, but Marvin Mims, they seem to be unlocking how to actually use him. Some of that backfield deployment, as you said, Vele was impressive as a rookie. If he continues to kick on, like he'll be a useful player for them. You have the complete absence of impact from Troy Franklin as a rookie, but we really liked him at the time they drafted him. I would still add a wide receiver, but I'm not like it's not a glaring massive, this has to be fixed ASAP type of deal. The offensive line's in pretty good shape. The defensive line's in pretty good shape. Like the defense period is in good shape. You need corner depth, and I'd certainly target a kind of slot or a joker type of weapon that can play nickel sub packages and be an impact player there. But like Sertan on one spot, Riley Moss on the other look like a good duo. This is a good team now.
Yeah, it is. It is pretty solid. And again, but now the goal, of course, is knock off the Chiefs. So,
Right.
and they're competitive against, again, head-to-head games. They're competitive against the Chiefs. They've matched up well, and Vance Joseph's done a nice job defensively against them. That's all fine and good. But you're talking about, okay, how do you compete with the Chiefs? And that's where I think potentially some aggressive moves. And look, I think they're one of the most common teams drafting a tight end because that's how most people do the mock draft thing, right? They're going to do the same thing we did. You look up and down the roster. Well, there's not a ton of needs, but man, they could use a tight end. So give them a tight end and give them Tyler Warren or Colston Loveland or whatever. I would be interested though in cornerback too. And I know Riley Moss played pretty well at times last year, but I would attack that again, Sam, with Patrick Surtain being so good on one side. I don't want to deal with what they dealt with last year where there were injuries and teams could throw away from Surtain. What if they just attacked that position and made sure that they had incredible depth and flexibility in the secondary with a first round corner, compete with Riley Moss, and make sure that you have somebody good opposite Patrick Surtain. What are you
I
smirking
think,
for?
yeah. Well, I just think it's funny that you're busy to go after Riley Moss given the season he's had.
He's all right. He's
I
fine.
I, I just think it's
I
harsh.
want to ensure that we have a very deep group of corners.
I think Riley Moss looked very good as a second cover guy. It's interesting. He's an example of. So I think his PFF grade is fairly middling, but it's because like he just had an amazing capacity to like blow contain on his side of the defense. Like there's so many huge plays went around him, largely in the run game, where he just tracks inside or misses something and like just suddenly there's nobody there on that side of the defense. I think his basic coverage was better than that. And I think they massively missed him when he was out of the lineup. I think he's fine as a starting corner. I would want to upgrade that slot. And okay, if you can get a guy that has a bit of flexibility and could do either, all the better. But the slot or like my primary nickel defender is the real sort of area that I would be targeting for them.
So let's get Jedi Barron, who can do both from
Yes.
Texas. How about that? We're gonna get Barron for the Broncos.
Love that.
I might wait on the. I'm not saying I have to take him. Where are they picking? Right at the maybe
20.
not. Yeah, maybe not that high, but maybe I don't know. Barron at 20, or trade down, get Barron, and then tight end in the second round. There's tight end depth, I think, to whether it is an Arroyo or Mason Taylor. I think you can get a decent tight end there. I don't think you have to go with one of those first round tight ends if you're the Broncos, just because it looks like the most glaring need. Like any team, you could use more defensive line depth. I think defensive tackle. You could add more there with where's my? I just lost my list here. DJ Jones being a free agent. Like I'm not saying you're directly trying to replace him, but just making sure that you maintain that depth up front on the defensive line. And they could use one of those 340 to 360 pounders that we keep talking about. Are they in the Kenneth Grant sweepstakes as well, as far as defensive line goes, especially at 20? That'd be great value.
Yeah, I love the Barron suggestion for them. I think that would be an amazing fit within this defense, within a defense that's already really good. So I think that one's awesome. Again, I think you're right. Tight end, because it's such a deep class, you can get those guys outside of the first round. That would be I think an optimal way of doing that, find the guy that is a perfect fit within your defense in round one, come back for a tight end in the second or the third, and we're cooking.
Then there are already rumors that Taysom Hill could land in Denver. And so, look, we know that one of their needs is also running back. And I think in this draft, almost certainly should be drafting a running back, just getting an Audric Estime should easily be that guy. We know that. We all know Estime should be the guy, right? He should be RB1 heading into next year. They'll probably draft someone else, but they could also bring in running back Taysom Hill.
I mean, I certainly like that as a fit better than tight end Taysom Hill. I think that's what Taysom Hill is. That makes sense. Like, now, I mean, you're unlikely to make Taysom Hill your starting running back, right? So that means Estime is RB1, McLaughlin is in there as the pass catching guy, and then Taysom Hill is the third option. Is that what we're doing here?
Yeah, that's it.
Don't hate it.
Estime, young guy, Taysom Hill, because Taysom Hill's game plan oriented, move him around, do different stuff. Yeah, that's what you're doing. Now, Clint Kubiak has unlocked Taysom Hill more than Sean Payton ever did, but still, maybe Sean's learned from Kubiak.
But Kubiak didn't give him the $40 million contract that Payton did. So,
no, that's true. So those rumors are already out there, and I don't hate it. I'm all in on the Taysom Hill experiment. I think they will draft a running back. We joke. I mean, we both really liked Estime coming in. I think Jaleel McLaughlin's a really nice change of pace, got some quicks and burst and outside run type of ability, but it is a good draft to draft an RB1. Amarian Hampton's getting a ton of hype right now, Sam. I got to go back and rewatch some of his film because there were some concerning things that I saw, but I get it. I mean, he's good. He's getting a ton of hype, maybe even first round hype. I don't think Ashton Genty's available at 20. But given the rest of the roster, like, is this one of those fits where if Genty was there at 20, that he fits in here for them?
I mean, we said this before, right? When it came up either on when some mock that we were talking about, it's like, I don't know that I love the fit here because I don't know that this offense has not been good at run blocking. So I don't know that a running back coming in is immediately fixing it and turning this into like a powerful, dominant run team. Genty would be the guy, but I don't love the fit necessarily here. And I also think, again, in this deep running back draft, unless you have one of those situations, like unless you're rocking in there with the Eagles offensive line or the Lions offensive line, neither of whom has an issue at running back right now, I don't know that I want to spend a first round pick on a guy like Genty because I don't think I have the situation good enough for him to look the way he should look if I'm drafting him in the first round. Like, I would come back later in this draft. Like, he would feel like a good landing spot for your favorite guy, Scatabo.
Oh, man. Do it. Get him in the third? Can we get him in the third? We're drafting Scatabo. Oh, if they had Scatabo and Estime. The Broncos are like the team that drafts all my favorite players, I think, the last few years. Marvin Mims, Troy Franklin, Estime. Like, they're drafted Nick Bonito. Like, drafted a lot of my favorites. So, like, definitely getting Scatabo here.
I mean, dude, if you signed Taysom Hill and then drafted Scatabo, like, the sheer grit levels are just off the charts.
Plus, Scatabo had, like, the passing touchdown, the receiving touchdown, all in the same game. He had his own Taysom Hill game. Yes.
But like that's more lunch pail grit than any team has ever had since the 1970s.
Riley Moss at corner. Can't teach it. Can't teach that, man. They're going to win the AFC West. We did have some questions about free agents. I would keep an eye, if there's a tight end need, I would keep an eye on Juwan Johnson, former Saint, and maybe reuniting with Peyton. Like, if they want to fill things through free agency and not have to force the draft pick at tight end and hit some other needs in the draft, Juwan Johnson or a Mike Gesicki, Johnson especially for the connection, but either of those guys as a pass-catching tight end, I'd be good with for the right price.
Peyton is definitely a big, like, I like this guy, and I'm going to keep, like, little Jordan Humphrey still getting snaps for them. Like, absolutely anybody that previously had been a Peyton project should be in consideration.
By the way, Lil Jordan is also a free agent. We expect him to be back with Sean Payton because what else is he going to do? He's got to be back.
Unless he goes for one of his other projects like Juwan Johnson or Taysom Hill.
All right. So have we fixed the Broncos? We're going to get Scatabo. What else we drafting? What else we're going to get? Juwan Johnson.
Barron in the first round.
Oh, yeah, Jedi Barron. Beautiful. This is good. I think we fixed the Broncos. Anything else?
No, I think it's good. Like I said, this is a good team that doesn't need that much. We're going to tinker with some defensive line depth, but man, they're good to go.
Perna, let us know. Make sure we solve the Broncos issues enough. All right, let's go to the Raiders. Fascinating team. This is one of the most fascinating off seasons that I'm looking forward to, because for the 12th straight show, I will recite Pete Carroll, John Spytek coming in, and Pete Carroll coming in, I think, is a culture reset. And let me just start with this. A couple of years ago, when they got the new GM, and we said, look, you can either say you're close and you're going to try to go win, or you can look at this roster and be honest about it and rebuild this thing from the ground up. And they said, no, we're close. We're trading for Devontae Adams. We're going to be aggressive. And here we are, 3 years later, Raiders are in the same exact spot with only 4 returning starters on the defensive side of the ball. It's like set up to reset this entire thing. Plus you have a guy in Pete Carroll who did reset everything in Seattle. Same thing I said about the Jets. 2026 should be the focus here for the Raiders, especially in a division where the other 3 teams made the playoffs. 2026 should be the goal here for the Raiders. Every move pointed toward the future.
Yeah, so the question becomes, like, obviously step one, this is a team that hasn't had the quarterback for years. Do they try and make that happen now, go aggressively after a legitimate answer at the position, like this is the guy not just for now but for the future? Or do we have yet one more year with effectively killing time, treading water with a bridge, albeit under a new regime that has they've got the time to do that?
I mean, I think it's a bridge quarterback type of situation. You need Pete Carroll to bring in his Charlie Whitehurst. Charlie Whitehurst was the bridge. It's the bridge quarterback. And before they signed Matt Flynn and stumbled into Russell Wilson in the 3rd round.
Boy, Jesus.
And I say stumbled into, the rumors will say coming out of Seattle was that John Schneider did want to draft Russ in the 1st round, and everybody talked him into like, just wait. And they got him in the 3rd. So he did love Russell Wilson. But the bridge was Charlie Whitehurst. Play bridge quarterback here. The only alternative is if you love a guy and he falls to you, right? If they love Shadur, if they love Cam Ward, they feel good about those guys, and he falls to 7-6, right?
Yeah. Well, or
if he falls, you take him. But for now, I'm going bridge and building up everything else.
Definitely the first part of that you love one of those top 2 quarterbacks, Cam Ward or Shadur. But the alternative is they don't fall to you, but they fall within range where you might be willing to trade for it. Like, let's say right now they don't want to give up the kind of Carolina trade haul to go from, like, the Panthers had to go from 9 to 1. So it would be less expensive than that, but still significant, right? Let's say they don't want to jump to 1, they don't want to jump to 2. But if the Giants pass on their guy, right, the guy that the Raiders love, and suddenly their guy is at 4, I mean,
maybe. I mean, look, I know some people are going to say, well, just wait for Arch Manning. Like, we have no idea how good Arch Manning is actually going to be, both at Texas and as an NFL prospect. Right. There's no guarantee in the future. Other years there might be, right? And we know Trevor Lawrence is coming out, or we know Caleb Williams is coming out. And again, they might not be guarantees once they get here anyway. So there's not like a necessarily next year is definitely going to be better. So, yeah, I think if they get close, maybe you go get one of those guys if you really like them.
For anyone, like, you might make the argument, well, if he falls to 4, then he'll fall to 6 because New England is 4. They're not drafting a quarterback. Jacksonville is 5. They're not drafting a quarterback. So just at that point, just be patient and wait. But the reason you trade to 4 is to stop other teams jumping you and jumping into those spaces. Like the Jets pick behind you. If the Jets love one of those guys, they could jump you to 4 and they get the quarterback and you get nothing because you were trying to wait it out. So I'm just saying if you love Cam Ward or Shadur Sanders and one of those guys gets past the Giants, I think you'd be kind of crazy not to trade to 4 and make that happen.
I'd be fine with that, and I would also say it's not a terrible offense to step into, right? There's other offenses.
Pretty solid.
Yeah, like you step into other offenses, like the Patriots last year, right? The offensive line's awful.
Yeah,
You don't have dependable guys to throw to. Raiders have a pretty good offensive line, should be okay. You have a Jacoby Myers, you have Brock Bowers, like you have some dependable players there. I'd like to see more. I'd like to see more explosive
sure.
players on the outside, whatever. But it's not. It's not the team isn't in great spot, but I think the offense is in a good enough spot that I think a Shedeur Sanders can come in and have some success. Say,
And you have draft picks to make that move happen without sacrificing your ability to get, another wide receiver or another whatever position down the line. Like the Raiders have got a ton of draft picks. Okay, a lot of them are low down, but you could make that move, that jump from 6 to 4 without without doing what the Panthers did, which is like this costs us the ability to put a receiver next to this quarterback that we're drafting.
yeah, it's the defense that needs an entire overhaul. So let's play
Yeah.
this game. Like, let's roll with Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell. I don't even know if I want to sign anyone else. I don't even think I need to. Like, just play
What's
that
like
game. If someone falls or whatever, I'll get them. But I'm not trying to like grab a Sam Darnold. Definitely not. There's no Aaron Rodgers, right? Like Aaron Rodgers is not coming in. It's a culture reset move. We're looking to 2026. We're not playing. Let's try to win 1 year with Rodgers. Like that's off the table for me if I'm the Raiders in particular.
Do you kind of want to see that? Rodgers in Vegas with Tom Brady over his shoulder. Pete Carroll trying to get the best
I'm
out of him.
GM right now. I'm not you. Like we should do one game. Let's do one show where we just root for the storylines. Let's just do a storyline show. Like what's all the stuff that should happen just for the story, right? We could play that game. For the story, it's fun to watch Aaron Rodgers play under Pete Carroll in the same division as Mahomes and Herbert and the Broncos, and Tom Brady's the owner. That's fun. But while we're playing GM, yeah, it's not happening.
It's kind of a shame that Tom Brady actually has that, announcing job where he's got to be somewhere in every given Sunday, because him like sitting there in Mark Davis's luxury box, like glaring at Aaron Rodgers doing stuff on the field would be peak TV. That would be way more entertaining than anything he's done from the announcing booth.
We've also talked about how Brady always relates everything to himself. There's definitely something in his brain that says, I mean, at 41, I was still balling. Like I was still really good at 41. Aaron Rodgers is 41. He could be great. Like, I mean, I won a Super Bowl at 42.
Right.
Aaron Rodgers can do that. Let's get him.
Brady's looking at Rodgers being like, he's got 4 or 5 more good years left in him.
Yes. So, that's not happening for us though. So I'm here for draft all those 10 draft picks, draft a ton, replenish the defense, look to 2026. If I don't have a quarterback this year, I'm okay with it. Get another weapon to complement Brock Bowers, who I think, will continue to be special. There's a reason why he received a first place vote for Offensive Rookie of the Year. There's a reason why Brock Bowers had at least one first place vote for O'Roy. He's special. And I'm just looking at 2026 with every move here.
Exactly one, in fact.
Exactly one. So when the players that I suggested for the Jets, like if you're gonna look to the future, a Mike Jackson, the cornerback who played with Carolina last year, if you're gonna make a free agent move, it better be something that's not short term; it's more long term. So you're trying to grab some of those younger players that are going to be a part of that rebuild going forward, like a Mike Jackson at corner.
Are you in? So if you don't, what are you doing with 6 if you're not going for a quarterback?
Oh,
because 6.
This is just out of that blue chip range.
But it probably gets you the top pass catcher in the draft. Like that gets you maybe Tedero McMillan, for example. Now,
I don't know if I want to take McMillan that high. I know you didn't love McMillan or haven't loved him.
Yeah, I mean, to me, wide receiver Travis Hunter is a better receiver than Tedero McMillan.
Yeah, I don't love that spot in the draft at all. I think at the end of the day, I'm going to feel really good as far as non-QBs go. I'm going to feel really good about Abdul Carter and Mason Graham and Travis Hunter. I'm going to feel good about those guys. I'd be fine taking either of the quarterbacks. That's 5 players. And then the Raiders are at 6. I mean, it might be corner.
But I think...
Will Johnson? That's
the thing. I think the way the draft unfolds, probably it it's those exact 5 players that go before the Raiders get picked.
So then I'm back like, okay, maybe you should go get the quarterback the way this draft is. Because if I'm at 6, I want to trade down, but we always play this game like who's going to trade up and what are they trading up for? If I could get from 6 to 15 or 12 or something like that, I'd feel much better picking in that spot and have more picks. I would love to have more picks in the 20 to 80 range in this draft overall. So yeah, it's not an easy spot. I mean, if it's McMillan, I think I'd be fine with that. It would Tederill and McMillan to go with Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers. And so what you're doing, like if you go this route, you're just laying the infrastructure for the next QB. And the next QB could be like Matthew Stafford for 2 years starting next year. It could be the next guy that you draft. It could be whoever, but you're just putting the infrastructure in place to plop the QB in there.
But I also feel like defense is so far away that I would almost try and focus on offense and like ensure that whether if I'm not getting my QB this year, I'm getting him next year. I want to make sure that next year's guy gets a chance to step into like a legitimately good situation around him, even if the defense is garbage, as opposed to let's dedicate my highest priced assets to defense because that's the side that's far away. You still aren't really good overall, and the QB has a harder job because you didn't get him, a number one receiver, and he's still dealing with Brock Bowers and friends. Like I would really double down on making this like the most one-sided team in football. Like offense is good, defense stinks, and we'll deal with that later.
Yeah, I mean, part of having the offense good is to make sure that a rookie steps into a good situation, and if there is a veteran that becomes available, that it's an attractive landing spot, right? If for some reason, that strategy looked better a couple of years ago when we thought Deshaun Watson was good and Aaron Rodgers was potentially available and Russell Wilson was available and we thought he was good, right? 3-4 years ago. That was we haven't run into any of those veterans moving that are, good enough to really make that happen. But you really want to make sure that the infrastructure around the next quarterback is in a good spot.
Yeah. So I might take McMillan at that top draft spot just to lock in one of the best.
That's assuming if Mason Graham fell, that'd be awesome. I saw somebody comp him to Christian Wilkins. I mean, I think that's fine. Have 2 of them. Mason Graham, like if one of those guys fell for whatever reason, I would pounce on that. It just feels like they might all be going top 5, right? Mason Graham, Travis Hunter, and Abdul Carter.
Right.
I would go back to the defensive line again. Another draft though. Like with all those picks, I think they can draft 2 or 3 defensive linemen in this draft. Have to replenish there. I mean, you still need to. I still think you need to bring in a lot of pieces on the defensive side. Even though what you're saying about make sure the offense is in order for a year from now. Yeah, I get it. The general debate though about like draft the QB now or put the pieces around him. The more we talk through it, maybe I would go get one of those 2 guys and just see if I can get a Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward and not feel like I'm on the outside looking in now for the 3rd straight year if you're the Raiders in the QB market.
Yeah, it's funny because it is the 3rd straight year. On the other hand, it's the first year with this new regime, so they're not burdened by that kind of weight of this is the 3rd year we've done this. Like I think this regime can afford to say we're probably not getting the guy this year, or we don't love any of the guys this year. Let's do it next year and let's build around. But like Raiders fans will be looking at this going, this is 3 years now where we've got nothing at quarterback. Like, what are we doing?
That's why I say you got to reset expectations and say we're competing in 26. The running game was obviously an issue for the Raiders. Pete's going to want to run the ball. They need to grab a running back somewhere here. They would be a great fit for Scattaboo. Oh, Pete Carroll would love Scattaboo. Pete would love Scattaboo. Everybody would love Scattaboo. Right?
Yeah.
Got a text from a GM who said he's a dog. Dog. That's it. I'm just gonna run with that from the entire offseason. Text from a GM, nice. Scattaboo. Dog. So we haven't. My fix for the Raiders is draft a lot. Already got draft a lot of good players.
Draft a lot of good.
Lot of defensive linemen. Best player available at 6. Get the QB if you need to, but just think 26 with every move. You can't be doing any short-term moves here if you're the Raiders.
Right. I mean, we've established there.
And pray, as Will Morris says.
Yeah, they're punting on quarterback this year. We're not completely tearing it down, right? We're not trading away Max Crosby,
I'm not.
and then
No.
we're drafting all the good players we can, so that next year we're good.
Convince Max that he's going to be a Raider for life, and he's a part of the team that's going to knock off the Chiefs in the AFC West in 26 and beyond. That's what we're doing.
Perfect.
Raiders fixed.
Fixed.
Look at that. We're halfway through the league so quickly. This is fun. Got to tell you about our friends over at ZBiotics, and this is great. My friend Jeremy's coming to Indy next week, and he's like, I had to get some ZBiotics to get ready for the combine. We're giving him his first combine experience. So after a night with drinks, we don't bounce back like we used to. You can now have a great night and a great next day with ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol. ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol Probiotic Drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. You drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. But Pre-Alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make Pre-Alcohol your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. So we'll be getting some firsthand accounts next week from one of our listeners. With Pre-Alcohol, you can stay on track and not let winter travel and celebrations throw you off course. Go to ZBiotics.com/check.the.mic to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use check.the.mic at checkout. ZBiotics is backed by 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to ZBiotics.com/check.the.mic and use the code check.the.mic at checkout for 15% off. All right, Sam. Halfway through the league, fixing every team in 5 minutes. We're going to have these next two shows, the North and the South, next week on Wednesday and Thursday. And, of course, Monday is Mock Draft Monday. So we'll be back again Monday with more Check the Mic and some level of mock draft. So appreciate everybody for tuning in. We'll see you again Monday with more Check the Mic.